Hey, hey, it's Ray Langley at your service, virtual entertainer and wolf girl extraordinaire. Welcome to the Maltese Falcon finale stream. Today we're going to be finishing up reading The Maltese Falcon by Dashiell Hammett? I think it's Hammett. um, Hammett, yeah. Dashiell Hammett. We'll be finishing up reading that today, and we will be reading chapters 16 through 20. Welcome in to Candace and Fizcatos. It's good to see you guys. How is everyone doing this morning? We just go ahead and copy the link. There you guys go. So you can read along with the story over here. As I have done in previous parts, I always share the story where I can, so that you're able to read along as I do my narration. And yeah, all right. Everyone can hear the background music fine? Have a little bit of ambiance as we get into this. All right. So then, let me just adjust my mic real quick. Get out of the way. Okay, there we go. And get my water nearby. Alrighty. Let's see where we last left off. Oh, welcome in, Army. Good to see you. How are you doing? So where we left off last time, we finally have gotten some answers as to what the bird exactly is. The Maltese Falcon being essentially a centuries-old trinket that has been covered up in a sort of layer of black paint to hide that is in fact a jewel-encrusted, very valuable bird, worth about, I believe they said 10 million, 5 million, which in 1930s money is about 32 million. Something to that effect. Let's see. 4 out of 6 exams done. Very nice. You're almost there. Hope they're going well for you. Hope they're not too haven't been too tough for you with all that studying you did. You've got this. You're more than halfway there. All right. I believe there is also so not only have we found out what the bird is, but we also now have a missing O'Shaughnessy. So where did she end up? Let's find out. Only one more week and then I can finally... Nice. Alrighty. Here we are. Chapter 16. The Third Murder. Spade went into the Hotel Sutter and telephoned the Alexandria. Gutman was not in. No member of Gutman's party was in. Spade telephoned the Belvedere. Cairo was not in. Had not been in that day. Spade went to his office. A swart, greasy man in notable clothes was waiting in the outer room. Effie Perrin, indicating the swart man, said, "This gentleman wishes to see you, Mr. Spade." Spade smiled and bowed and opened the inner door. "Come in." Before following the man in, Spade asked Effie Perrin, "Any news on that other matter?" "No, sir." The swart man was the proprietor of a moving picture theater in Market Street. He suspected one of his cashiers and a doorman of colluding to defraud him. Spade hurried him through the story, promised to take care of it, asked for and received $50, and got rid of him in less than half an hour. When the corridor door had closed behind the showman, Effie Perrin came into the inner office. Her sunburnt face was worried and questioning. "You haven't found her yet?" she asked. He shook his head and went on stroking his bruised temple lightly in circles with his fingertips. "How is it?" she asked. "All right, but I've got plenty of headache." She went around behind him, put his hand down, and stroked his temple with her slender fingers. He leaned back until the back of his head over the chair top rested against her breast. He said, "You're an angel." She bent her head forward over his and looked down into his face. "You've got to find her, Sam. It's more than a day, and she—" He stirred and impatiently interrupted her. "I haven't got to do anything, but if you'll let me rest this damn head a minute or two, I'll go out and find her." She murmured, "Poor head," and stroked it in silence a while. Then she asked, "You know where she is? Have you any idea?" The telephone bell rang. Spade picked up the telephone and said, "Hello?" "Yes, Sid, it came out all right. Thanks." "No." "Sure." "He got snotty, but so did I." "He's nursing a gambler's warp pipe dream." "Well, we didn't kiss when we parted. I declared my weight and walked out on him. That's something for you to worry about." "Right. Bye." He put the telephone down and leaned back in his chair again. Effie Perrin came from behind him and stood at his side. She demanded, "Do you think you know where she is, Sam?" "I know where she went," he replied in a grudging tone. "Where?" She was excited. "Down to the boat you saw burning." Her eyes opened until their brown was surrounded by white. "You went down there?" It was not a question. "I did not," Spade said. "Sam!" she cried angrily. "She may be—" "She went down there," he said in a surly voice. "She wasn't taken. She went down there instead of to your house when she learned the boat was in. Well, what the hell? Am I supposed to run around after my clients begging them to let me help them?" "But Sam, when I told you the boat was on fire—" "That was at noon, and I had a date with Polehouse and another with Brian." She glared at him between tightened lids. "Sam Spade," she said, "you're the most contemptible man God ever made when you want to be. Because she did something without confiding in you, you'd sit here and do nothing when you know she's in danger, when you know she might be—" Spade's face flushed. He said stubbornly, "She's pretty capable of taking care of herself, and she knows where to come for help when she thinks she needs it, and when it suits her." "That's spite!" the girl cried. "And that's all it is. You're sore because she did something on her own hook without telling you. Why shouldn't she? You're not so damned honest, and you haven't been so much on the level with her that she should trust you completely." Spade said, "That's enough of that." His tone brought a brief, uneasy glint into her hot eyes, but she tossed her head and the glint vanished. Her mouth was drawn taut and small. She said, "If you don't go down there this very minute, Sam, I will, and I'll take the police down there." Her voice trembled, broke, and was thin and wailing. "Oh, Sam, go!" He stood up, cursing her. Then he said,
Christ, it'll be easier on my head than sitting here listening to you squawk.
He looked at his watch.
You might as well lock up and go home.
She said, I won't. I'm going to wait right here till you come back. He said,
Do as you damn please.
Put his hat on, flinched, took it off, and went out carrying it in his hand. An hour and a half later, at 20 minutes past 5, Spade returned. He was cheerful. He came in asking,
What makes you so hard to get along with, sweetheart?
Me?
Yes, you.
He put a finger on the tip of Effie Perrin's nose and flattened it. He put his hands under her elbows, lifted her straight up, and kissed her chin. He set her down on the floor again and asked,
Anything doing while I was gone?
Luke, what's his name? At the Belvedere called up and to tell you that Cairo has returned. That was about half an hour ago. Spade snapped his mouth shut, turned with a long step, and started for the door. Did you find her? The girl called.
Tell you about it when I'm back.
He replied without pausing and hurried out. A taxicab brought Spade to the Belvedere within 10 minutes of his departure from his office. He found Luke in the lobby. The hotel detective came grinning and shaking his hand to meet Spade.
15 minutes late, he said. Your bird has fluttered.
Spade cursed his luck.
Checked out. Gone bag and luggage,
Luke said. He took a battered memorandum book from a vest pocket, licked his thumb, thumbed pages, and held the book out open to Spade.
There's the number of the taxi that holds him. I got that much for you.
Thanks. Spade copied the number on the back of an envelope.
Any forwarding address?
No.
He just came in carrying a big suitcase and went upstairs and packed and came down with his stuff, paid his bill, got a taxi, and went without anybody being able to hear what he told the driver.
How about his trunk?
Luke's lower lip sagged. By God, he said. I forgot that. Come on.
They went up to Cairo's room. The trunk was there. It was closed, but not locked. They raised the lid. The trunk was empty. Luke said, What do you know about that? Spade did not say anything. Spade went back to his office. Effie Perrin looked up at him inquisitively.
Missed him.
Spade grumbled and passed into his private room. She followed him in. He sat in his chair and began to roll a cigarette. She sat on the desk in front of him and put her toes on a corner of his chair seat. What about Miss O'Shaughnessy? She demanded.
Missed her too,
he replied.
But she had been there.
On the La Paloma?
The La is a lousy combination,
he said. Stop it. Be nice, Sam. Tell me. He set fire to his cigarette, pocketed his lighter, patted her shins, and said,
Yes, La Paloma. She got down there at a little after noon yesterday.
He pulled his brows down.
That means she went straight there after leaving the cab at the ferry building. It's only a few piers away. Captain wasn't aboard. His name's Jacoby, and she asked for him by name. He was uptown on business. That would mean he didn't expect her, or not at that time anyway. She waited there till he came back at 4 o'clock. They spent the time from then till mealtime in his cabin, and she ate with him.
He inhaled and exhaled smoke, turned his head aside to spit a yellow tobacco flake off his lip, and went on.
After the meal, Captain Jacoby had 3 more visitors. One of them was Gutman, and one was Cairo, and one was the kid who delivered Gutman's message to you yesterday. Those 3 came together while Brigid was there, and the 5 of them did a lot of talking in the captain's cabin. It's hard to get anything out of the crew, but they had a row, and somewhere around 11 o'clock that night a gun went off there, in the captain's cabin. The watchman beat it down there, but the captain met him outside and told him everything was alright. There's a fresh bullet hole in one corner of the cabin, up high enough to make it likely that the bullet didn't go through anybody to get there. As far as I could learn, there was only the one shot, but as far as I could learn, wasn't very far.
He scowled and inhaled smoke again.
Well, they left around midnight, the captain and his 4 visitors altogether, and all of them seemed to have been walking all right. I got that from the watchman. Haven't been able to get hold of the custom housemen who were on duty there then. That's all of it. The captain hasn't been back since. He didn't keep a date he had this noon with some shipping agents, and they haven't found him to tell him about the fire.
And the fire? She asked. Spade shrugged.
I don't know. It was discovered in the hold, aft, in the rear basement, late this morning. The chances are it got started sometime yesterday. They got it out all right, though it did damage enough. Nobody liked to talk about it much while the captain's away. It's the...
The corridor door opened. Spade shut his mouth. Effie Perrin jumped down from the desk, but a man opened the connecting door before she could reach it.
Where's Spade?
The man asked. His voice brought Spade up erect and alert in his chair. It was a voice harsh and rasping with agony and with the strain of keeping two words from being smothered by the liquid bubbling that ran under and behind them. Effie Perrin, frightened, stepped out of the man's way. He stood in the doorway with his soft hat crushed between his head and the top of the doorframe. He was nearly 7 feet tall. A black overcoat cut long and straight and like a sheath, buttoned from throat to knees, exaggerated his leanness. His shoulders stuck out high, thin, angular. His bony face, weather-coarsened, age-lined, was the color of wet sand and was wet with sweat on cheeks and chin. His eyes were dark and bloodshot and mad above lower lids that hung down to show pink inner membrane. Held tight against the left side of his chest by a black-sleeved arm that ended in a yellowish claw was a brown paper-wrapped parcel bound with thin rope, an ellipsoid somewhat larger than an American football. The tall man stood in the doorway, and there was nothing to show that he saw Spade. He said, "You know," and the liquid bubbling came up in his throat and submerged whatever else he said. He put his other hand over the hand that held the ellipsoid. Holding himself stiffly straight, not putting his hands out to break his fall, he fell forward as a tree falls. Spade, wooden-faced and nimble, sprang from his chair and caught the falling man. When Spade caught him, the man's mouth opened and a little blood spurted out, and the brown-wrapped parcel dropped from the man's hands and rolled across the floor until a foot of the desk stopped it. Then the man's knees bent, and he bent at the waist, and his thin body became limber inside the sheath-like overcoat, sagging in Spade's arms so that Spade could not hold it up from the floor. Spade lowered the man carefully until he lay on the floor on his left side. The man's eyes, dark and bloodshot, but not now mad, were wide open and still. His mouth was open as when blood had spurted from it, but no more blood came from it, and all his long body was as still as the floor it lay on. Spade said,
"Lock the door."
When Effie Perrin, her teeth chattering, fumbled with the corridor door's lock, Spade knelt beside the thin man, turning him over on his back, and ran a hand down inside his overcoat. When he withdrew the hand presently, it came out smeared with blood. The sight of his bloody hand brought not the least nor briefest of changes to Spade's face. Holding that hand up where it would touch nothing, he took his lighter out of his pocket with his other hand. He snapped on the flame and held the flame close to first one and then the other of the thin man's eyes. The eyes' lids, balls, irises, and pupils remained frozen, immobile. Spade extinguished the flame and returned the lighter to his pocket. He moved on his knees around to the dead man's side and, using his one clean hand, unbuttoned and opened the tubular overcoat. The inside of the overcoat was wet with blood, and the double-breasted blue jacket beneath it was sodden. The jacket's lapels, where they crossed over the man's chest, and both sides of his coat immediately below that point, were pierced by soggy, ragged holes. Spade rose and went to the washbowl in the outer office. Effie Perrin, wan and trembling and holding herself upright by means of a hand on the corridor door's knob and her back against its glass, whispered, Is he?
Yes. Shot through the chest, maybe half a dozen times.
Spade began to wash his hands. Oughtn't we? She began, but he cut her short.
It's too late for a doctor now, and I've got to think before we do anything.
He finished washing his hands and began to rinse the bowl.
He couldn't have come far with those in him. If he... Why in hell couldn't he have stood up long enough to say something?
He frowned at the girl, rinsed his hands again, and picked up a towel.
Pull yourself together. For Christ's sake, don't get sick on me now.
He threw the towel down and ran fingers through his hair.
We'll have a look at that bundle.
He went into the inner office again, stepped over the dead man's legs, and picked up the brown paper-wrapped parcel. When he felt its weight, his eyes glowed. He put it on his desk, turning it over so that the knotted part of the rope was uppermost. The knot was hard and tight. He took out his pocket knife and cut the rope. The girl had left the door and, edging around the dead man with her face turned away, had come to Spade's side. As she stood there, hands on a corner of the desk, watching him pull the rope loose and push aside brown paper, excitement began to supplant nausea in her face. Do you think it is? She whispered.
We'll soon know,
Spade said, his big fingers busy with the inner husk of coarse gray paper, 3 sheets thick, that the brown paper's removal had revealed. His face was hard and dull, his eyes were shining. When he had put the gray paper out of the way, he had an egg-shaped mass of pale excelsior wadded tight. His fingers tore the wad apart, and then he had the foot-high figure of a bird, black as coal and shiny where its polish was not dulled by wood dust and fragments of excelsior. Spade laughed. He put a hand down on the bird. His wide-spread fingers had ownership in their curving. He put his other arm around Effie Perrin and crushed her body against his.
We've got the damn thing, Angel,
he said. Ouch, she said. You're hurting me. He took his arm away from her, picked the blackbird up in both hands, and shook it to dislodge clinging excelsior. Then he stepped back, holding it up in front of him, and blew dust off it, regarding it triumphantly. Effie Perrin made a horrified face and screamed, pointing at his feet. He looked down at his feet. His last backward step had brought his left heel into contact with the dead man's hand, pinching a 1/4 inch of flesh at the side of the palm between heel and floor. Spade jerked his foot away from the hand. The telephone bell rang. He nodded at the girl. She turned to the desk and put the receiver to her ear. She said, Hello? Yes. Who? Oh, yes. Her eyes became large. Yes, yes. Hold the line. Her mouth suddenly stretched wide and fearful. She cried, Hello, hello, hello. She rattled the prong up and down and cried, Hello, twice. Then she sobbed and spun around to face Spade, who was close beside her by now. It was Miss O'Shaughnessy, she said wildly. She wants you. She's at the Alexandria, in danger. Her voice was, oh, it was awful, Sam. And something happened to her before she could finish. Go help her, Sam. Sam put the Falcon down on the desk and scowled gloomily.
I've got to take care of this fellow first,
he said, pointing his thumb at the thin corpse on the floor. She beat his chest with her fist, crying, No, no, you've got to go to her. Don't you see, Sam? He had the thing that was hers, and he came to you with it. Don't you see? He was helping her, and they killed him, and now she's... Oh, you've got to go.
All right.
Spade pushed her away and bent over his desk, putting the blackbird back into its nest of excelsior, bending the paper around it, working rapidly, making a larger and clumsy package.
As soon as I've gone, phone the police. Tell them how it happened, but don't drag any names in. You don't know. I got the phone call and I told you I had to go out, but I didn't say where.
He cursed the rope for being tangled, yanked it into straightness, and began to bind the package.
Forget this thing. Tell it as it happened, but forget he had a bundle.
He chewed his lower lip.
Unless they pin you down. If they seem to know about it, you'll have to admit it, but that's not likely. If they do, then I took the bundle away with me, unopened.
He finished tying the knot and straightened up with the parcel under his left arm.
Get it straight now. Everything happened the way it did happen, but without this dingus, unless they already know about it. Don't deny it, just don't mention it. And I got the phone call, not you. And you don't know anything about anybody else having any connection with this fellow. You don't know anything about him, and you can't talk about my business until you see me. Got it?
Yes, Sam. Do you know who he is? He grinned wolfishly.
Uh-huh,
he said.
But I guess he was Captain Jacoby, master of La Paloma.
He picked up his hat and put it on. He looked thoughtfully at the dead man and then around the room. Hurry, Sam, the girl begged.
Sure,
he said absent-mindedly.
I'll hurry. Might not hurt to get those few scraps of Excelsior off the floor before the police come. And maybe you ought to try to get a hold of Sid. No.
He rubbed his chin.
We'll leave him out of it a while. It'll look better. I'd keep the door locked till they come.
He took his hand from his chin and rubbed her cheek.
You're a damn good man, sister,
he said and went out. That's the end of chapter 16. At this point, I feel like Effie is a cat. Yeah, the way he keeps just picking her up. She wants you, no shit. And then for those of you who don't know, Excelsior is a word given to wood shavings that are used for packaging purposes. So... and then later became used as Stanley's catchphrase. Okay. Chapter 17, Saturday night. Carrying the parcel lightly under his arm, walking briskly with only the ceaseless shifting of his eyes to denote wariness, Spade went, partly by way of an alley and a narrow court, from his office building to Kearney and Post Streets, where he hailed a passing taxicab. The taxicab carried him to the Pickwick Stage Terminal in 5th Street. He checked the bird at the parcel room there, put the check into a stamped envelope, wrote M.F. Holland and a San Francisco post office box number on the envelope, sealed it, and dropped it into a mailbox. From the stage terminal, another taxicab carried him to the Alexandria Hotel. Spade went up to Suite 12C and knocked on the door. The door was opened when he had knocked a second time by a small, fair-haired girl in a shimmering yellow dressing gown, a small girl whose face was white and dim, and who clung desperately to the inner doorknob with both hands and gasped, "Mr. Spade?" Spade said, "Yes," and caught her as she swayed. Her body arched back over his arm, and her head dropped straight back so that her short fair hair hung down her scalp, and her slender throat was a firm curve from chin to chest. Spade slid his supporting arm higher up her back and bent to get his other arm under her knees, but she stirred then, resisting, and between party lips that barely moved, blurred words came. "No, Mama." Spade made her walk. He kicked the door shut, and he walked her up and down the green carpeted room from wall to wall. One of his arms around her small body, that hand under her armpit, his other hand gripping her other arm, held her erect when she stumbled, checked her swaying, kept urging her forward, but made her tottering legs bear all the weight they could bear. They walked across and across the floor. The girl falteringly, with incoordinate steps, Spade surely on the balls of his feet, with balance unaffected by her staggering. Her face was chalk white and eyeless, his sullen with eyes hardened to watch everywhere at once. He talked to her monotonously.
That's the stuff. Left, right, left, right. That's the stuff. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Now we turn.
He shook her as they turned from the wall.
Now back again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold your head up. That's the stuff. Good girl. Left, right, left, right. Now we try again. Turn again.
He shook her again.
That's a girl. Walk, 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 walk. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we go around.
He shook her more roughly and increased their pace.
That's the trick. Left, right, left, right. We're in a hurry. 1, 2, 3.
He shuddered and swallowed audibly. She shuddered and swallowed audibly. Spade began to chafe her arm and side, and he put his mouth nearer her ear.
That's fine. You're doing fine. 1, 2, 3, 4. Faster, 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 faster. That's it. Step, 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 step. Pick them up and lay them down. That's the stuff. Now we turn. Left, right, left, right. What'd they do? Dope you? The same stuff they gave me?
Her eyelids twitched up then for an instant over dulled golden brown eyes, and she managed to say all of yes, except the final consonant. They walked the floor, the girl almost trotting now to keep up with Spade, Spade slapping and kneading her flesh through yellow silk with both hands, talking and talking while his eyes remained hard and aloof and watchful. Left, right, left, right, left, right, turn. That's a girl. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Keep the chin up. That's the stuff. 1, 2. Her lids lifted again a bare fraction of an inch, and under them her eyes moved weakly from side to side.
That's fine,
he said in a crisp voice, dropping his monotone.
Keep them open. Open them wide. Wide!
He shook her. She moaned in protest, but her lids went farther up, though her eyes were without inner light. He raised his hand and slapped her cheek half a dozen times in quick succession. She moaned again and tried to break away from him. His arm held her and swept her along beside him from wall to wall.
Keep walking, he ordered in a harsh voice, and then, who are you?
Her Rhea Gutman was thick but intelligible.
The daughter?
Yeah. Now she was no farther from the final consonant than sh.
Where's Brigid?
She twisted convulsively around in his arms and caught at one of his hands with both of hers. He pulled his hand away quickly and looked at it. Across its back was a thin red scratch 1.5 inches or more in length.
What the hell?
He growled and examined her hands. Her left hand was empty. In her right hand, when he forced it open, lay a 3-inch jade-headed steel bouquet pin.
What the hell?
He growled again and held the pin in front of her eyes. When she saw the pin, she whimpered and opened her dressing gown. She pushed aside the cream-colored pajama coat under it and showed him her body below her left breast, white flesh crisscrossed with thin red lines, dotted with tiny red dots where the pin had scratched and punctured it. Just stay awake. Walk till you came. She said you'd come. We're so long. She swayed. Spade tightened his arm around her and said, walk. She fought against his arm, squirming around to face him again. I'll tell you. Sleep. Save her.
Brigid?
He demanded. Yes. Took her. Burlingame. 26 Anchor. Hurry. Too late. Her head fell over on her shoulder. Spade pushed her head up roughly.
Who took her there? Your father?
Yes. Wilbur. Cairo. She writhed and her eyelids twitched but did not open. Kill her. Her head fell over again, and again he pushed up.
Who shot Jacoby?
She did not seem to hear the question. She tried pitifully to hold her head up, to open her eyes. She mumbled, "Go. She..."
He shook her brutally. Stay awake till the doctor comes.
Fear opened her eyes and pushed for a moment the cloudiness from her face. "No, no," she cried thickly. "Father, kill me. Swear you won't. He'd know. I did for her. Promise. Won't sleep. All right. Morning." He shook her again.
You're sure you can sleep the stuff off all right?
"Yeah." Her head fell down again.
Where's your bed?
She tried to raise a hand, but the effort had become too much for her before the hand pointed at anything except the carpet. With the sigh of a tired child, she let her whole body relax and crumple. Spade caught her up in his arms, scooped her up as she sank, and holding her easily against his chest, went to the nearest of the 3 doors. He turned the knob far enough to release the catch, pushed the door open with his foot, and went into the passageway that ran past an open bathroom door to a bedroom. He looked into the bathroom, saw it was empty, and carried the girl into the bedroom. Nobody was there. The clothing that was in sight and things on the chiffonier said it was a man's room. Spade carried the girl back to the green carpeted room and tried the opposite door. Through it, he passed into another passageway, past another empty bathroom, and into a bedroom that was feminine in its accessories. He turned back the bedclothes and laid the girl on the bed, removed his slippers, raised her a little to slide the yellow dressing gown off, fixed a pillow under her head, and put the covers up over her. Then he opened the room's 2 windows and stood with his back to them, staring at the sleeping girl. Her breathing was heavy but not troubled. He frowned and looked around, working his lips together. Twilight was dimming the room. He stood there in the weakening light for perhaps 5 minutes. Finally, he shook his thick, sloping shoulders impatiently and went out, leaving the suite's outer door unlocked. Spade went to the Pacific Telephone and Telegraph Company station in Powell Street and called Davenport 2020.
Emergency hospital, please. Hello, there's a girl in suite 12C at the Alexandria Hotel who has been drugged. Yes, you'd better send somebody to take a look at her. This is Mr. Hooper of the Alexandria.
He put the receiver on its prong and laughed. He called another number and said,
Hello, Frank. This is Sam Spade. Can you let me have a car with a driver who will keep his mouth shut? To go down the peninsula right away. Just a couple hours. Right. Have him pick me up at John's, Ellis Street, as soon as he can make it.
He called another number, his office's, held the receiver to his ear for a little while without saying anything, and replaced it on its hook. He went to John's Grill, asked the waiter to hurry his order of chops, baked potato, and sliced tomatoes, ate hurriedly, and was smoking a cigarette with his coffee when a thick-set youngish man with a plaid cap, set askew above pale eyes and a tough, cheery face, came into the grill and to his table. All set, Mr. Spade. She's full of gas and rearing to go.
Swell.
Spade emptied his cup and went out with the thick-set man.
Know where Ancho Avenue or Road or Boulevard is in Burlingame?
Nope, but if she's there, we can find her.
Let's do that.
Spade said as he sat beside the chauffeur in the dark Cadillac sedan.
26 is the number we want, and the sooner the better, but we don't want to pull up at the front door.
Correct. They rode half a dozen blocks in silence. The chauffeur said, Your partner got knocked off, didn't he, Mr. Spade?
Uh-huh.
The chauffeur clucked. She's a tough racket. You can have it for mine.
Well, hack drivers don't live forever.
Maybe that's right. The thick-set man conceded. But just the same, it will always be a surprise to me if I don't. Spade stared ahead at nothing and thereafter, until the chauffeur, tired of making conversation, replied with uninterested yeses and nos. At a drugstore in Burlingame, the chauffeur learned how to reach Ancho Avenue. 10 minutes later, he stopped the sedan near a dark corner, turned off the lights, and waved his hand at the block ahead. "There she is," he said. "She ought to be on the other side, maybe the third or fourth house." Spade said, "Right," and got out of the car.
"Keep the engine going. We may have to leave in a hurry."
He crossed the street and went up the other side. Far ahead, a lone streetlight burned. Warmer lights dotted the night on either side, where houses were spaced half a dozen to a block. A high, thin moon was cold and feeble as the distant streetlight. A radio droned through the open windows of a house on the other side of the street. In front of the second house, from the corner, Spade halted. On one of the gateposts that were massive, out of all proportion to the fence flanking them, a 2 and a 6 of pale metal caught what light there was. A square white card was nailed over them. Putting his face close to the card, Spade could see that it was a for sale or rent sign. There was no gate between the posts. Spade went up the cement walk to the house. He stood still on the walk at the foot of the porch steps for a long moment. No sound came from the house. The house was dark except for another pale square card nailed on its door. Spade went up to the door and listened. He could hear nothing. He tried to look through the glass of the door. There was no curtain to keep his gaze out, but inner darkness. He tiptoed to a window and then to another. They, like the door, were uncurtained except by inner darkness. He tried both windows. They were locked. He tried the door. It was locked. He left the porch and, stepping carefully over dark, unfamiliar ground, walked through weeds around the house. The side windows were too high to be reached from the ground. The back door and the one back window he could reach were locked. Spade went back to the gatepost and, cupping a flame between his hands, held his lighter up to the for sale or rent sign. It bore the printed name and address of a San Mateo real estate dealer and a line penciled in blue. Key at 31. Spade returned to the sedan and asked the chauffeur,
"Got a flashlight?"
"Sure." He gave it to Spade. "Can I get you a hand at anything?"
"Maybe."
Spade got into the sedan.
"We'll ride up to number 31. You can use your lights."
Number 31 was a square gray house across the street from, but a little farther up than, 26. Lights glowed in its downstairs windows. Spade went up on the porch and rang the bell. A dark-haired girl of 14 or 15 opened the door. Spade, bowing and smiling, said,
"I'd like to get the key to number 26.
"I'll call Papa," she said, and went back into the house calling, "Papa." A plump, red-faced man, bald-headed and heavily mustached, appeared carrying a newspaper. Spade said,
"I'd like to get the key to 26.
The plump man looked doubtful. He said,
"The juice is not on. You couldn't see anything."
Spade patted his pocket.
"I've got a flashlight."
The plump man looked more doubtful. He cleared his throat uneasily and crumpled the newspaper in his hand. Spade showed him one of his business cards, put it back in his pocket, and said in a low voice,
"We got a tip that there might be something hidden there."
The plump man's face and voice were eager.
"Wait a minute,"
he said.
"I'll go over with you."
A moment later, he came back carrying a brass key attached to a black and red tag. Spade beckoned to the chauffeur as they passed the car, and the chauffeur joined them.
Anybody been looking at the house lately?
Spade asked.
Not that I know of, the plump man replied. Nobody's been to me for the key in a couple of months.
The plump man marched ahead with the key until they had gone up on the porch. Then he thrust the key into Spade's hand, mumbled,
"Here you are,"
and stepped aside. Spade unlocked the door and pushed it open. There was silence and darkness. Holding the flashlight, dark in his left hand, Spade entered. The chauffeur came close behind him, and then at a little distance the plump man followed them. They searched the house from bottom to top, cautiously at first, then, finding nothing, boldly. The house was empty, unmistakably, and there was nothing to indicate it had been visited in weeks. Saying,
"Thanks, that's all."
Spade left the sedan in front of the Alexandria. He went into the hotel to the desk where a tall young man with a dark gray face said,
"Good evening, Mr. Spade." "Good evening."
Spade drew the young man to one end of the desk.
"These Gutmans up in 12C, are they in?"
The young man replied, "No," darting a quick glance at Spade. Then he looked away, hesitated, looked at Spade again, and murmured, "A funny thing happened in connection with them this evening, Mr. Spade. Somebody called the emergency hospital and told them there was a sick girl up there."
"And there wasn't?"
"Oh no, there was nobody up there. They went out earlier in the evening." Spade said,
"Well, these practical jokers have to have their fun. Thanks."
He went to a telephone booth, called a number, and said,
"Hello? Mrs. Perrin? Is Effie there?" "Yes, please." "Thanks." "Hello, Angel. What's the good word?" Fine, hold it. I'll be out in 20 minutes. Right.
Half an hour later, Spade rang the doorbell of a two-story brick building in 9th Avenue. Effie Perrin opened the door. Her boyish face was tired and smiling. "Hello, boss," she said. "Enter," she said in a low voice. "If Ma says anything to you, Sam, be nice to her. She's all up in the air." Spade grinned reassuringly and patted her shoulder. She put her hands on his arm. "Miss O'Shaughnessy?"
"No," he growled. "I ran into a plant. Are you sure it was her voice?"
"Yes." He made an unpleasant face.
"Well, it was hooey."
She took him into a bright living room, sighed, and slumped down on one end of a Chesterfield, smiling cheerfully up at him through her weariness. He sat beside her and asked,
"Everything went okay? Nothing said about the bundle?"
"Nothing. I told them what you told me to tell them, and they seemed to take it for granted that the phone call had something to do with it, and that you were running it down."
"Dundee there?"
"No. Hoff and Ogar and some others I didn't know. I talked to the captain, too."
"They took you down to the hall?"
"Oh, yes, and they asked me loads of questions, but it was all, routine." Spade rubbed his palms together.
"Swell,"
he said, and then frowned.
"Though I guess they'll think up plenty to put to me when we meet. That damn Dundee will, anyway, and Brian."
He moved his shoulders.
"Anybody you know outside of the police come around?"
"Yes." She sat up straight. "That boy, the one who brought the message from Gutman, was there. He didn't come in, but the police left the corridor door open while they were there, and I saw him standing there."
"You didn't say anything?"
"Oh, no. You said not to, so I didn't pay attention to him, and the next time I looked, he was gone." Spade grinned at her.
"Damn lucky for you, sister, that the coppers got there first."
"Why?"
"He's a bad egg, that lad. Poison. Was the dead man Jacoby?"
"Yes." He pressed her hands and stood up.
"I'm gonna run along. You'd better hit the hay. You're all in.
She rose. Sam, what is. He stopped her words with his hand on her mouth.
Save it till Monday,
He said.
I want to sneak out before your mother catches me and gives me hell for dragging her lamb through gutters.
Midnight was a few minutes away when Spade reached his home. He put his key into the street door's lock. Heels clicked rapidly on the sidewalk behind him. He let go of the key and wheeled. Bridget O'Shaughnessy ran up the steps to him. She put her arms around him and hung on him, panting. Oh, I thought you'd never come. Her face was haggard, distraught, shaken by the tremors that shook her from head to foot. With the hand not supporting her, he felt for the key again, opened the door and half lifted her inside.
You've been waiting?
He asked. Yes, panting spaced her words. In a doorway up the street.
Can you make it all right?
He asked.
Or shall I carry you?
She shook her head against his shoulder. I'll be all right. When I get where I can sit down. They rode up to Spade's floor in the elevator and went around to his apartment. She left his arm and stood beside him, panting, both hands to her breast, while he unlocked his door. He switched on the passageway light. They went in. He shut the door and, with his arm around her again, took her back toward the living room. When they were within a step of the living room, the light in the living room went on. The girl cried out and clung to Spade. Just inside the living room door, Fat Gutman stood smiling benevolently at them. The boy Wilmer came out of the kitchen behind them. Black pistols were gigantic in his small hands. Cairo came from the bathroom. He too had a pistol. Gutman said,
Well, sir, we're all here as you can see for yourself. Now let's come in and sit down and be comfortable and talk.
I'm gonna get some water. I'll be right back. That was the end of chapter 17. And we're back. How's everyone doing so far? Looks like we finally got to the part in the adventure where you walk into the dark room and the light clicks on and the big bad guy is sitting there waiting for you. Like a trap that's been sprung. Thanks for the welcome back, guys. Alright. We've walked into the lion's den. And there's a bunch of hungry hyenas around. Or something. Chapter 18. The Fall Guy. Spade, with his arms around Bridget O'Shaughnessy, smiled meagerly over her head and said,
Sure, we'll talk.
Gutman's bulbs jounced as he took 3 waddling backward steps away from the door. Spade and the girl went in together. The boy and Cairo followed them in. Cairo stopped in the doorway. The boy put away one of his pistols and came up close behind Spade. Spade turned his head far around to look down over his shoulder at the boy and said,
Get away. You're not gonna frisk me.
The boy said,
Stand still.
Shut up. Spade's nostrils went in and out with his breathing. His voice was level.
Get away. Put your paw on me and I'm gonna make you use the gun. Ask your boss if he wants me shot up before we talk.
Never mind, Wilmer,
the fat man said. He frowned indulgently at Spade.
You are certainly a most headstrong individual. Well, let's be seated.
Spade said,
I told you I didn't like that punk.
And took Bridget O'Shaughnessy to the sofa by the windows. They sat close together, her head against his left shoulder, his left arm around her shoulders. She had stopped trembling, had stopped panting. The appearance of Gutman and his companions seemed to have robbed her of that freedom of personal movement and emotion that is animal, leaving her alive, conscious, but quiescent as a plant. Gutman lowered himself into the padded rocking chair. Cairo chose the armchair by the table. The boy Wilmer did not sit down. He stood in the doorway where Cairo had stood, letting his one visible pistol hang down at his side, looking under curling lashes at Spade's body. Cairo put his pistol on the table beside him. Spade took off his hat and tossed it to the other end of the sofa. He grinned at Gutman. The looseness of his lower lip and the droop of his upper eyelids combined with the V's in his face to make his grin lewd as a satyr's.
A daughter of yours has a nice belly, he said. Too nice to be scratched up with pins.
Gutman's smile was affable, if a bit oily. The boy in the doorway took a short step forward, raising his pistol as far as his hip. Everybody in the room looked at him. In the dissimilar eyes with which Bridget O'Shaughnessy and Joe Cairo looked at him, there was oddly something identically reproving. The boy blushed, drew back his advanced foot, straightened his legs, lowered the pistol, and stood as he stood before, looking under lashes that hid his eyes at Spade's chest. The blush was pale enough and lasted for only an instant, but it was startling on his face that habitually was so cold and composed. Gutman turned his sleek-eyed, fat smile on Spade again. His voice was a suave purring.
Yes, sir, that was a shame, but you must admit that it served its purpose.
Spade's brows twitched together.
Anything would've,
he said.
Naturally, I wanted to see you as soon as I had the Falcon. Cash customers. Why not? I went to Burlingame expecting to run into this sort of a meeting. I didn't know you were blundering around half an hour late, trying to get me out of the way so you could find Jacoby again before he found me.
Gutman chuckled. His chuckle seemed to hold nothing but satisfaction.
Well, sir, he said, in any case, here we are having our little meeting, if that's what you wanted.
That's what I wanted. How soon are you ready to make the first payment and take the Falcon off my hands?
Bridget O'Shaughnessy sat up straight and looked at Spade with surprised blue eyes. He patted her shoulder inattentively. His eyes were steady on Gutman's. Gutman's twinkled merrily between sheltering fat puffs. He said,
Well, sir, as to that,
and put a hand inside the breast of his coat. Cairo, hands on thighs, leaned forward in his chair, breathing between parted soft lips. His dark eyes had the surface shine of lacquer. They shifted their focus warily from Spade's face to Gutman's, from Gutman's to Spade's. Gutman repeated,
Well, sir, as to that,
and took a white envelope from his pocket. 10 eyes, the boy's now only half obscured by his lashes, looked at the envelope. Turning the envelope over in his swollen hands, Gutman studied for a moment its blank white front and then its back. Unsealed, with the flap tucked in, he raised his head, smiled amiably, and scaled the envelope at Spade's lap. The envelope, though not bulky, was heavy enough to fly true. It struck the lower part of Spade's chest and dropped down onto his thighs. He picked it up deliberately and opened it deliberately, using both hands, having taken his left arm from around the girl. The contents of the envelope were $1,000 bills, smooth and stiff and new. Spade took them out and counted them. There were 10 of them. Spade looked up smiling. He said mildly,
We were talking about more money than this.
Yes, sir, we were, Gutman agreed. But we were talking then. This is actual money. Genuine coin of the realm, sir. With $1 of this, you can buy more than with $10 of talk.
Silent laughter shook his bulbs. When their commotion stopped, he said more seriously, yet not altogether seriously,
There are more of us to be taken care of now.
He moved his twinkling eyes and used his fat head to indicate Cairo.
And, well, sir, in short, the situation has changed.
While Gutman talked, Spade had tapped the edges of the 10 bills into alignment and returned them to their envelope, tucking the flap in over them. Now, with forearms on knees, he sat hunched forward, dangling the envelope from a corner held lightly by finger and thumb down between his legs. His reply to the fat man was careless.
Sure, you're together now, but I've got the Falcon.
Joe Cairo spoke. Ugly hands grasping the arms of his chair, he leaned forward and said primly in his high-pitched, thin voice, I shouldn't think it would be necessary to remind you, Mr. Spade, that though you may have the Falcon yet, we certainly have you. Spade grinned.
I'm trying to not let that worry me,
he said. He sat up straight, put the envelope aside on the sofa, and addressed Gutman.
We'll come back to the money later. There's another thing that's got to be taken care of first. We've got to have a fall guy.
The fat man frowned without comprehension, but before he could speak, Spade was explaining.
The police have got to have a victim, somebody they can stick for those 3 murders.
Cairo, speaking in a brittle, excited voice, interrupted Spade. 2? Only 2 murders, Mr. Spade. Thursby undoubtedly killed your partner.
All right, 2. Spade growled. What difference does that make? The difference is the point is we've got to feed the police some.
Now Gutman broke in, smiling confidently, talking with good-natured assurance.
Well, sir, from what we've seen and heard of you, I don't think we'll have to bother ourselves about that. We can leave the handling of the police to you, all right? You won't need any of our inexpert help.
If that's what you think,
Spade said,
you haven't seen or heard enough.
Now come, Mr. Spade. You can't expect us to believe at this late date that you are the least bit afraid of the police or that you are not quite able to handle.
Spade snorted with throat and nose. He bent forward, resting forearms on knees again, and interrupted Gutman irritably.
I'm not a damn bit afraid of them, and I know how to handle them. That's what I'm trying to tell you. The way to handle them is to toss them a victim, somebody they can hang the works on.
Well, sir, I grant you that's one way of doing it, but hell,
Spade said.
It's the only way.
His eyes were hot and earnest under a reddening forehead. The bruises on his temple were liver-colored,
I know what I'm talking about. I've been through it all before and expect to go through it again. At one time or another, I've had to tell everybody from the Supreme Court down to go to hell, and I've got away with it. I got away with it because I never let myself forget that a day of reckoning was coming. I never forget that when the day of reckoning comes, I want to be all set to march into headquarters, pushing a victim in front of me saying, "Here, you chumps, is your criminal." As long as I can do that, I can put my thumb to my nose and wriggle my fingers at all the laws in the book. The first time I can't do it, my name's Mud. There hasn't been a first time yet. This isn't going to be it. That's flat.
Gutman's eyes flickered, and their sleekness became dubious, but he held his other features in their bulbous pink, smiling, complacent cast, and there was nothing of uneasiness in his voice. He said, "That's a system that's got a lot to recommend it, sir. By gad, it has. And if it was anyway practical this time, I'd be the first to say, stick to it by all means, sir. But this just happens to be a case where it's not possible. That's the way it is with the best of systems. There comes a time when you've got to make exceptions, and a wise man just goes ahead and makes them. Well, sir, that's just the way it is in this case, and I don't mind telling you that I think you're being very well paid for making an exception. Now, maybe it will be a little more trouble to you than if you had your victim to hand over to the police, but..." He laughed and spread his hands. "You're not a man that's afraid of a little bit of trouble. You know how to do things, and you'll know you'll land on your feet in the end, no matter what happened." He pursed his lips and partly closed one eye. "You'll manage that, sir." Spade's eyes had lost their warmth. His face was dull and lumpy.
"I know what I'm talking about,"
he said in a low, consciously patient tone.
"This is my city and my game. I could manage to land on my feet, sure, this time. But the next time I tried to put over a fast one, they'd stop me so fast I'd swallow my teeth. Hell with that. You birds will be in New York or Constantinople someplace else. I'm in business here."
"But surely," Gutman began,
I can't," Spade said earnestly. "I won't. I mean it."
He sat up straight. A pleasant smile illuminated his face, erasing its dull lumpishness. He spoke rapidly in an agreeable, persuasive tone.
"Listen to me, Gutman. I'm telling you what's best for all of us. If we don't give the police a fall guy, it's 10 to 1 they'll sooner or later stumble on information about the Falcon. Then you'll have to duck for cover with it no matter where you are. And that's not going to help you make a fortune off it. Give them a fall guy and they'll stop right there."
"Well, sir, that's just the point," Gutman replied, and still only in his eyes was uneasiness faintly apparent. "Will they stop right there, or won't the fall guy be a fresh clue that as likely as not will lead them to information about the Falcon? And on the other hand, wouldn't you say they were stopped right now, and that the best thing for us to do is leave well enough alone?" A forked vein began to swell in Spade's forehead.
"Jesus, you don't know what it's all about either,"
he said in a restrained tone.
"They're not asleep, Gutman. They're lying low, waiting. Try to get that. I'm in it up to my neck and they know it. That's all right as long as I do something when the time comes. But it won't be all right if I don't."
His voice became persuasive again.
"Listen, Gutman. We've absolutely got to give them a victim. There's no way out of it. Let's give them the punk."
He nodded pleasantly at the boy in the doorway.
"He actually did shoot both of them, Thursby and Jacoby, didn't he? Anyway, he's made to order for the part. Let's pin the necessary evidence on him and turn him over to them."
The boy in the doorway tightened the corners of his mouth in what may have been a minute smile. Spade's proposal seemed to have no other effect on him. Joe Cairo's dark face was open-mouthed, open-eyed, yellowish, and amazed. He breathed through his mouth, his round, effeminate chest rising and falling, while he gaped at Spade. Bridget O'Shaughnessy had moved away from Spade and had twisted herself around on the sofa to stare at him. There was a suggestion of hysterical laughter behind the startled confusion in her face. Gutman remained still and expressionless for a long moment. Then he began to laugh. He laughed heartily and lengthily, not stopping until his sleek eyes had borrowed merriment from his laughter. When he stopped laughing, he said, "By gad, sir, you're a character, that you are." He took a white handkerchief from his pocket and wiped his eyes. "Yes, sir. There's never been any telling what you'll do or say next, except that it's bound to be something astonishing."
There's nothing funny about it.
Spade did not seem offended by the fat man's laughter, nor in any way impressed. He spoke in the manner of one reasoning with a recalcitrant but not altogether unreasonable friend.
"It's our best bet. With him in their hands, the police will—"
"But, my dear man," Gutman objected, "can't you see, if I even for a moment thought of doing it? But that's ridiculous, too. I feel towards Wilmer just exactly as if he were my own son, I really do. But if I even for a moment thought of doing what you propose, what in the world do you think would keep Wilmer from telling the police every last detail about the Falcon and all of us?"
Spade grinned with stiff lips.
"If we had to,"
he said softly.
"we could have him killed resisting arrest, but we won't have to go that far. Let him talk his head off. I promise you nobody will do anything about it. That's easy enough to fix."
The pink flesh on Gutman's forehead crawled in a frown. He lowered his head, mashing his chins together over his collar, and asked, "How?" Then, with an abruptness that set all his fat bulbs to quivering and tumbling against one another, he raised his head, squirmed around to look at the boy, and laughed uproariously.
"What do you think of this, Wilmer? It's funny, eh?"
The boy's eyes were cold hazel gleams under his lashes. He said in a low, distinct voice, "Yes, it's funny, son of a bitch." Spade was talking to Bridget O'Shaughnessy.
"How do you feel now, Angel? Any better?"
"Yes, much better. Only—" She reduced her voice until the last words would have been unintelligible 2 feet away. "I'm frightened."
"Don't be,"
he said carelessly, and put a hand on her gray-stockinged knee.
"Nothing very bad's gonna happen. Want a drink?"
"Not now, thanks." Her voice sank again. "Be careful, Sam." Spade grinned and looked at Gutman, who was looking at him. The fat man smiled genially, saying nothing for a moment, then asked, "How?" Spade was stupid.
"How what?"
The fat man considered more laughter necessary then and an explanation.
"Well, sir, if you're really serious about this suggestion of yours, the least we can do in common politeness is to hear you out. Now, how are you going about fixing it so that Wilmer—"
He paused here to laugh again.
"won't be able to do us any harm?"
Spade shook his head.
"No," he said. "I wouldn't want to take advantage of anybody's politeness, no matter how common like that. Forget it."
The fat man puckered up his facial bulbs.
"Now come," he protested. "You make me decidedly uncomfortable. I shouldn't have laughed, and I apologize most humbly and sincerely. I wouldn't want to seem to ridicule anything you'd suggest, Mr. Spade, regardless of how much I disagreed with you, for you must know that I have the greatest respect and admiration for your astuteness. Now, mind you, I don't see how this suggestion of yours can be in any way practical, even leaving out the fact that I couldn't feel any different towards Wilmer if he was my own flesh and blood. But I'll consider it a personal favor as well as a sign that you've accepted my apology, sir, if you'll go ahead and outline the rest of it."
"Fair enough,"
Spade said.
"Brian is like most district attorneys. He's more interested in how his record will look on paper than anything else. He'd rather drop a doubtful case than try it and have it go against him. I don't know that he ever deliberately framed anybody he believed innocent, but I can't imagine him letting himself believe them innocent if he could scrape up or twist into shape proof of their guilt. To be sure of convicting one man, he'll let half a dozen equally guilty accomplices go free, if trying to convict them all might confuse his case. That's the choice we'll give him, and he'll gobble it up. He wouldn't want to know about the Falcon. He'll be tickled pink to persuade himself that anything the punk tells him about it is a lot of chewing gum, an attempt to muddle things up. Leave that end to me. I can show him that if he starts fooling around trying to gather up everybody, he's going to have a tangled case that no jury will be able to make heads or tails of, while if he sticks to the punk, he can get a conviction standing on his head.
Gutman wagged his head sidewise in a slow, smiling gesture of benign disapproval.
No, sir, he said. I'm afraid that won't do. Won't do at all. I don't see how even this district attorney of yours can link Thursby and Jacoby and Wilmer together without having to.
You don't know district attorneys.
Spade told him.
The Thursby angle is easy. He was a gunman and so's your punk. Brian's already got a theory about that. There'll be no catch there. Well, Christ. They could only hang the punk once. Why try him for Jacoby's murder after he's been convicted of Thursby's? They simply close the record by writing it up against him and let it go at that. If, as is likely enough, he used the same gun on both, the bullets will match up. Everybody would be satisfied.
Yes, but...
Gutman began and stopped to look at the boy. The boy advanced from the doorway, walking stiff-legged with his legs apart, until he was between Gutman and Cairo, almost in the center of the floor. He halted there, leaning forward slightly from the waist, his shoulders raised toward the front. The pistol in his hand still hung at his side, but his knuckles were white over its grip. His other hand was a small, hard fist down at his other side. The indelible youngness of his face gave an indescribably vicious and inhuman turn to the white-hot hatred and the cold white malevolence in his face. He said to Spade in a voice cramped by passion, "You bastard, get up on your feet and go for your heater." Spade smiled at the boy. His smile was not broad, but the amusement in it seemed genuine and unalloyed. The boy said, "You bastard, get up and shoot it out if you've got the guts. I've taken all the riding from you I'm gonna take." The amusement in Spade's smile deepened. He looked at Gutman and said,
Young Wild West.
His voice matched his smile.
Maybe you ought to tell him that shooting me before you get your hands on the Falcon would be bad for business.
Gutman's attempt at a smile was not successful, but he kept the resultant grimace on his mottled face. He licked dry lips with a dry tongue. His voice was too hoarse and gritty for the paternally admonishing tone it tried to achieve.
Now, Wilmer, he said, we can't have any of that. You shouldn't let yourself attach so much importance to these things, you...
The boy, not taking his eyes from Spade, spoke in a choked voice out the side of his mouth.
Make him lay off me, then. I'm gonna fog him if he keeps it up, and there won't be anything that'll stop me from doing it. Now, Wilmer, Gutman said and turned to Spade. His voice and face were under control now. Your plan is, sir, as I said in the first place, not at all practical. Let's not say anything more about it.
Spade looked from one of them to the other. He had stopped smiling. His face held no expression at all.
I say what I please,
he told them.
You certainly do, Gutman said quickly. And that's one of the things I've always admired in you, but this matter is, as I say, not at all practical. So there's not the least bit of use of discussing it any further, as you can see for yourself.
I can't see it for myself,
Spade said.
And you haven't made me see it, and I don't think you can.
He frowned at Gutman.
Let's get this straight. Am I wasting time talking to you? I thought this was your show. Should I do my talking to the punk? I know how to do that.
No, sir, Gutman replied. You're quite right in dealing with me.
Spade said, all right. Now I've got another suggestion. It's not as good as the first, but it's better than nothing. Want to hear it?
Most assuredly.
Give them Cairo.
Cairo hastily picked up his pistol from the table beside him. He held it tight in his lap with both hands, its muzzle pointed at the floor a little to one side of the sofa. His face had become yellowish again. His black eyes darted their gaze from face to face. The opaqueness of his eyes made them seem flat, two-dimensional. Gutman, looking as if he could not believe he had heard what he had heard, asked,
"Do what?" "Give the police Cairo."
Gutman seemed about to laugh, but he did not laugh. Finally, he exclaimed,
"Oh, by gad, sir,"
in an uncertain tone.
"It's not as good as giving them the punk,"
Spade said.
"Cairo's not a gunman, and he carries a smaller gun than Thursby and Jacoby were shot with. We'll have to go to more trouble framing him, but that's better than not giving the police anybody."
Cairo said in a voice shrill with indignation, "Suppose we give them you, Mr. Spade, or Miss O'Shaughnessy. How about that if you're so set on giving them somebody?" Spade smiled at the Levantine and answered him evenly.
"You people want the Falcon. I've got it. A fall guy is part of the price I'm asking. As for Miss O'Shaughnessy,"
his dispassionate gaze moved to her to her white, perplexed face, and then back to Cairo, and his shoulders rose and fell a fraction of an inch.
"If you think she can be rigged for the part, I'm perfectly willing to discuss it with you."
The girl put her hands to her throat, uttered a short, strangled cry, and moved farther away from him. Cairo, his face and body twitching with excitement, exclaimed, "You seem to forget that you are not in a position to insist on anything." Spade laughed, a harsh, derisive snort. Gutman said in a voice that tried to make firmness ingratiating,
"Come now, gentlemen, let's keep our discussion on a friendly basis. But there certainly is," he was addressing Spade, "something in what Mr. Cairo says. You must take into consideration that the like hell I must."
Spade flung his words out with a brutal sort of carelessness that gave them more weight than they would have got from dramatic emphasis or from loudness.
"If you kill me, how are you going to get the bird? I know you can't afford to kill me till you have it. But how are you going to scare me into giving it to you?"
Gutman cocked his head to the left and considered these questions. His eyes twinkled between puckered lids. Presently he gave his genial answer.
"Well, sir, there are other means of persuasion besides killing and threatening to kill."
"Sure," Spade agreed.
"But they're not much good unless the threat of death is behind them to hold the victim down. See what I mean? If you try anything I don't like, I won't stand for it. I'll make it a matter of your having to call it off or kill me, knowing you can't afford to kill me."
"I see what you mean,"
Gutman chuckled.
That is an attitude, sir, that calls for the most delicate judgment on both sides. Because as you know, sir, men are likely to forget in the heat of action where their best interest lies, and let their emotions carry them away.
Spade, too, was all smiling blandness.
"That's the trick, from my side,"
he said.
"to make my play strong enough that it ties you up, but yet not make you mad enough to bump me off against your better judgment."
Gutman said fondly,
"My gad, sir, you are a character."
Joe Cairo jumped up from his chair and went around behind the boy and behind Gutman's chair. He bent over the back of Gutman's chair and, screening his mouth and the fat man's ear with his empty hand, whispered. Gutman listened attentively, shutting his eyes. Spade grinned at Bridget O'Shaughnessy. Her lips smiled feebly in response, but there was no change in her eyes. They did not lose their numb stare. Spade turned to the boy.
2-1, they're selling you out, son."
The boy did not say anything. A trembling in his knees began to shake the knees of his trousers. Spade addressed Gutman.
"I hope you're not letting yourself be influenced by the guns these pocket edition desperados are waving."
Gutman opened his eyes. Cairo stopped whispering and stood erect behind the fat man's chair.
Spade said, "I've practiced taking them away from both of them, so there'll be no trouble there. The punk is..."
In a voice choked horribly by emotion, the boy cried, "All right!" and jerked his pistol up in front of his chest. Gutman flung a fat hand out at the boy's wrist, caught the wrist, and bore it and the gun down while Gutman's fat body was rising in haste from the rocking chair. Joe Cairo scurried around to the boy's other side and grasped his other arm. They wrestled with the boy, forcing his arms down, holding them down while he struggled futilely against them. Words came out of the struggling group, fragments of the boy's incoherent speech. "Right, go, bastard! Smoke!" Gutman's "Now, Wilmer," repeated many times. Cairo's "No, please don't, and don't do that, Wilmer." Wooden-faced, dreamy-eyed, Spade got up from the sofa and went over to the group. The boy, unable to cope with the weight against him, had stopped struggling. Cairo, still holding the boy's arm, stood partly in front of him, talking to him soothingly. Spade pushed Cairo aside gently and drove his left fist against the boy's chin. The boy's head snapped back as far as it could while his arms were held, and then came forward. Gutman began a desperate, "Here, what?" Spade drove his right fist against the boy's chin. Cairo dropped the boy's arm, letting him collapse against Gutman's great round belly. Cairo sprang at Spade, clawing at his face with the curved, stiff fingers of both hands. Spade blew his breath out and pushed the Levantine away. Cairo sprang at him again. Tears were in Cairo's eyes, and his red lips worked angrily, forming words, but no sound came from between them. Spade laughed, grunted, "Jesus, you're a pip," and cuffed the side of Cairo's face with an open hand, knocking him over against the table. Cairo regained his balance and sprang at Spade the third time. Spade stopped him with both palms held out on long, rigid arms against his face. Cairo, failing to reach Spade's face with his shorter arms, thumped Spade's arms.
"Stop it," Spade growled. "I'll hurt you."
Cairo cried, "Oh, you big coward!" and backed away from him. Spade stooped to pick up Cairo's pistol from the floor and then the boy's. He straightened up, holding them in his left hand, dangling them upside down by their trigger guards from his forefinger. Gutman had put the boy in the rocking chair and stood looking at him with troubled eyes and an uncertainly puckered face. Cairo went down on his knees beside the chair and began to chafe one of the boy's limp hands. Spade felt the boy's chin with his fingers.
"Nothing cracked," he said. "We'll spread him on the sofa."
He put his right arm under the boy's arm and around his back, put his left forearm under the boy's knees, lifted him without apparent effort, and carried him to the sofa. Bridget O'Shaughnessy got up quickly, and Spade laid the boy there. With his right hand, Spade patted the boy's clothes, found his second pistol, added it to the others in his left hand, and turned his back on his sofa. Cairo was already sitting beside the boy's head. Spade clinked the pistols together in his hand and smiled cheerfully at Gutman.
"Well,"
he said,
"there's our fall guy."
Gutman's face was gray and his eyes were clouded. He did not look at Spade. He looked at the floor and did not say anything. Spade said,
"Don't be a damn fool again. You let Cairo whisper to you and you held the kid while I pasted him. You can't laugh that off and you're likely to get yourself shot trying to."
Gutman moved his feet on the rug and said nothing. Spade said,
"And the other side of it is that you'll either say yes right now, or I'll turn the Falcon and the whole goddamn lot of you in."
Gutman raised his head and muttered through his teeth, "Don't like that, sir."
"You won't like it,"
Spade said.
"Well?"
The fat man sighed and made a wry face and replied sadly,
"You can have him."
Spade said, "That's swell." And that's the end of chapter 18. Hell of a fight scene there. There are other means of persuasion. I don't think you necessarily want that. to be. There's really. I don't think you want that to be. We call it. Related to the song here. When the deal's being made between, like, a whole bunch of dudes. Unless you do, in which case. Alright. So, we're using the young boy as a decoy, or fall guy, so that the cops don't go after everyone else, and Spade decided to punch the hell out of him. I guess that's fair. And then Cairo got his ass kicked again, because Joe Cairo kind of just exists to be a jobber in this, I don't think Joe Cairo has won a single fight in this book. That's kind of hilarious. Okay. 2 more chapters. Chapter 19. The Russian's Hand. The boy lay on his back on the sofa, a small figure that was, except for its breathing, altogether corpse-like to the eye. Joe Cairo sat beside the boy, bending over him, rubbing his cheeks and wrists, smoothing his hair back from his forehead, whispering to him and peering anxiously down at his white, still face. Bridget O'Shaughnessy stood in an angle made by table and wall. One of her hands was flat on the table, the other to her breast. She pinched her lower lip between her teeth and glanced furtively at Spade whenever he was not looking at her. When he looked at her, she looked at Cairo and the boy. Gutman's face had lost its troubled cast and was becoming rosy again. He had put his hands in his trousers pockets. He stood facing Spade, watching him without curiosity. Spade, idly jingling his handful of pistols, nodded at Cairo's rounded back and asked Gutman,
"It'll be all right with him?"
"I don't know,"
the fat man replied placidly.
"That part will have to be strictly up to you, sir."
Spade's smile made his V-shaped chin more salient. He said,
"Cairo."
The Levantine screwed his dark, anxious face around over his shoulder. Spade said,
"Let him rest a while. We're gonna give him to the police. We ought to get the details fixed before he comes to."
Cairo asked bitterly, "Don't you think you've done enough to him without that?" Spade said,
"No."
Cairo left the sofa and went close to the fat man. "Please don't do this thing, Mr. Gutman," he begged. "You must realize that—"
Spade interrupted him. "That's settled. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Coming in or getting out?"
Though Gutman's smile was a bit sad, even wistful in its way, he nodded his head.
"I don't like it either,"
he told the Levantine.
"But we can't help ourselves now. We really can't."
Spade asked,
"What are you doing, Cairo? In or out?"
Cairo wet his lips and turned slowly to face Spade. "Suppose," he said, and swallowed. Can I choose?"
"You can," Spade assured him seriously, "but you ought to know that if the answer is out, we'll give you to the police with your boyfriend."
"Oh, come, Mr. Spade,"
Gutman protested. "That is not. Like hell we'll let him walk out on us," Spade said. "He'll either come in or he'll go in. We can't have a lot of loose ends hanging around."
He scowled at Gutman and burst out irritably.
"Jesus God, is this the first thing you guys ever stole? You're a fine lot of lollipops. What are you gonna do next? Get down and pray?"
He directed his scowl at Cairo.
Well, which?
You give me no choice. Cairo's narrow shoulders moved in a hopeless shrug. I come in.
Good,
Spade said and looked at Gutman and at Bridget O'Shaughnessy.
sit down.
The girl sat down gingerly on the end of the sofa by the unconscious boy's feet. Gutman returned to the padded rocking chair and Cairo to the armchair. Spade put his handful of pistols on the table and sat on the table corner beside them. He looked at the watch on his wrist and said,
2 o'clock. I can't get the Falcon till daylight, or maybe 8 o'clock. We've got plenty of time to arrange everything.
Gutman cleared his throat.
Where is it? He asked and then added in haste, I don't really care, sir. What I had in mind was that it would be best for all concerned if we did not get out of each other's sight until our business has been transacted.
He looked at the sofa and at Spade again, sharply.
You have the envelope?
Spade shook his head, looking at the sofa and then at the girl. He smiled with his eyes and said,
Miss O'Shaughnessy has it.
Yes, I have it, she murmured, putting a hand inside her coat. I picked it up.
That's all right,
Spade told her.
hang on to it.
He addressed Gutman.
We won't have to lose sight of each other. I can have the Falcon brought here.
That'll be excellent, Gutman purred. Then, sir, in exchange for the $10,000 and Wilmer, you will give us the Falcon and an hour or two of grace, so we won't be in the city when you surrender him to the authorities.
You don't have to duck,
Spade said.
It'll be airtight.
That may be, sir, but nevertheless we'll feel safer well out of the city when Wilmer is being questioned by your district attorney.
Suit yourself, Spade replied.
I can hold him here all day if you want.
He began to roll a cigarette.
Let's get the details fixed. Why did he shoot Thursby, and why and where and how did he shoot Jacoby?
Gutman smiled indulgently, shaking his head and purring.
Now come, sir. You can't expect that. We've given you the money and Wilmer. That is our part of the agreement.
I do expect it,
Spade said. He held his lighter to his cigarette.
A fall guy's what I asked for, and he's not a fall guy unless he's a cinch to take the fall. Well, to cinch that, I've got to know what's what.
He pulled his brows together.
What are you belly aching about? You're not going to be sitting so damn pretty if you leave him with an out.
Gutman leaned forward and wagged a fat finger at the pistols on the table beside Spade's legs.
There's ample evidence of his guilt, sir. Both men were shot with those weapons. It's a very simple matter for the police department experts to determine that the bullets that killed the men were fired from those weapons. You know that. You've mentioned it yourself. And that, it seems to me, is ample proof of his guilt.
Maybe,
Spade agreed.
But the thing's more complicated than that, and I've got to know what happened so I can be sure the parts that won't fit in are covered up.
Cairo's eyes were round and hot. Apparently, you've forgotten that you assured us it would be a very simple affair, Cairo said. He turned his excited dark face to Gutman. You see, I advised you not to do this. I don't think...
It doesn't make a damn bit of difference what either of you think,
Spade said bluntly.
It's too late for that now, and you're in too deep. Why did he kill Thursby?
Gutman interlaced his fingers over his belly and rocked his chair. His voice, like his smile, was frankly rueful.
You are an uncommonly difficult person to get the best of, he said. I began to think that we made a mistake in not letting you alone from the very first. By gad, I do, sir.
Spade moved his hand carelessly.
You haven't done so bad. You're staying out of jail, now you're getting the Falcon. What do you want?
He put his cigarette in a corner of his mouth and sat around it.
Anyhow, you know where you stand now. Why did you kill Thursby?
Gutman stopped rocking.
Thursby was a notorious killer and Miss O'Shaughnessy's ally. We knew that removing him in just that manner would make her stop and think that perhaps it would be best to patch up her differences with us after all. Besides, leaving her without so violent a protector. You see, sir, I am being candid with you.
Yes, keep it up. You didn't think he might have the Falcon?
Gutman shook his head so that his round cheeks wobbled. We didn't think that for a minute, he replied. He smiled benevolently. We had the advantage of knowing Miss O'Shaughnessy far too well for that, and while we didn't know then that she had given the Falcon to Captain Jacoby in Hong Kong to be brought over on the Paloma while they took a faster boat, still we didn't for a minute think that if only one of them knew where it was, Thursby was the one.
Spade nodded thoughtfully and asked,
You didn't try to make a deal with him before you gave him the works?
Yes, sir, we certainly did. I talked to him myself that night. Wilmer had located him 2 days before and had been trying to follow him to wherever he was meeting Miss O'Shaughnessy, but Thursby was too crafty for that, even if he didn't know he was being watched. So that night, Wilmer went to his hotel, learned he wasn't in, and waited outside for him. I suppose Thursby returned immediately after killing your partner. Be that as it may, Wilmer brought him to see me. We could do nothing with him. He was quite determinedly loyal to Miss O'Shaughnessy. Well, sir, Wilmer followed him back to the hotel and did what he did.
Spade thought for a moment.
That sounds all right. Now, Jacoby.
Gutman looked at Spade with grave eyes and said,
Captain Jacoby's death was entirely Miss O'Shaughnessy's fault.
The girl gasped and put a hand to her mouth. Spade's voice was heavy and even.
Never mind that now. Tell me what happened.
After a shrewd look at Spade, Gutman smiled.
Just as you say, sir, he said. Well, Cairo, as you know, got in touch with me. I sent for him. After he left police headquarters the night or morning he was up here, we recognized the mutual advantage of pooling forces.
He directed his smile at the Levantine.
Mr. Cairo is a man of nice judgment. The Paloma was his thought. He saw the notice of its arrival in the papers that morning and remembered he had heard in Hong Kong that Jacoby and Miss O'Shaughnessy had been seen together. That was when he had been trying to find her there, and he thought at first that she had left on the Paloma, though later he learned that she hadn't. Well, sir, when he saw the notice of arrival in the paper, he guessed just what had happened. She had given the bird to Jacoby to bring here for her. Jacoby did not know what it was, of course. Miss O'Shaughnessy is far too discreet for that.
He beamed at the girl, rocked his chair twice, and went on.
Mr. Cairo and Wilmer and I went to call on Captain Jacoby and were fortunate enough to arrive while Miss O'Shaughnessy was there. In many ways, it was a difficult conference, but finally, by midnight, we had persuaded Miss O'Shaughnessy to come to terms, or so we thought. We then left the boat and set out for my hotel, where I was to pay for Miss O'Shaughnessy and receive the bird. Well, sir, we mere men should have known better than to suppose ourselves capable of coping with her. En route, she and Captain Jacoby and the Falcon slipped completely through our fingers.
He laughed merrily.
By gad, sir, it was neatly done.
Spade looked at the girl. Her eyes, large and dark with pleading, met his. He asked Gutman,
You touched off the boat before you left?
Not intentionally, no, sir,
the fat man replied.
Though I dare say we, or Wilmer at least, were responsible for the fire. He had been out trying to find the Falcon while the rest of us were talking in the cabin, and no doubt was careless with matches.
That's fine, Spade said. If any slip-up makes it necessary for us to try him for Jacoby's murder, we can also hang an arson rap on him. All right. Now about the shooting.
Well, sir, we dashed around town all day trying to find them, and we found them late this afternoon. We weren't sure at first that we'd found them. All we were sure of was that we'd found Miss O'Shaughnessy's apartment. But when we listened at the door, we heard them moving around inside, so we were pretty confident we had them and rang the bell. When she asked us who we were and we told her through the door,
we heard a window going up. We knew what that meant, of course, so Wilmer hurried downstairs as fast as he could, and around to the rear of the building to cover the fire escape. And when he turned into the alley, he ran right plumb smack into Captain Jacoby, running away with the Falcon under his arm. That was a difficult situation to handle, but Wilmer did every bit as well as he could. He shot Jacoby more than once, but Jacoby was too tough to either fall or drop the Falcon, and he was too close for Wilmer to keep out of his way. He knocked Wilmer down and ran on, and this was in broad daylight, you understand, in the afternoon. When Wilmer got up, he could see a policeman coming up from the block below, so he had to give it up. He dodged into the open back door of the building next the coronet, through into the street, and then up to join us. And very fortunate he was, to make it without being seen. Well, sir, there we were, stumped again. Miss O'Shaughnessy had opened the door for Mr. Cairo and me after she had shut the window behind Jacoby, and she... He broke off to smile at a memory. We persuaded, that is the word, sir, her to tell us that she had told Jacoby to take the Falcon to you. It seemed very unlikely that he'd live to go that far, even if the police didn't pick him up, but that was the only chance we had, sir. And so, once more, we persuaded Miss O'Shaughnessy to give us a little assistance. We, persuaded her to phone your office in an attempt to draw you away before Jacoby got there, and we sent Wilmer after him. Unfortunately, it has taken us too long to decide and to persuade Miss O'Shaughnessy to... The boy on the sofa groaned and rolled over on his side. His eyes opened and closed several times. The girl stood up and moved into the angle of table and wall again. Cooperate with us, Gutman concluded hurriedly, and so you had the Falcon before we could reach you. The boy put one foot on the floor, raised himself on an elbow, opened his eyes wide, put the other foot down, sat up, and looked around. When his eyes focused on Spade, bewilderment went out of them. Cairo left his armchair and went over to the boy. He put his arm on the boy's shoulders and started to say something. The boy rose quickly to his feet, shaking Cairo's arm off. He glanced around the room once and then fixed his eyes on Spade again. His face was set hard, and he held his body so tense that it seemed drawn in and shrunken. Spade, sitting on the corner of the table, swinging his legs carelessly, said, "Now listen, kid. If you come over here and start cutting up, I'm gonna kick you in the face. Sit down and shut up and behave, and you'll last longer." The boy looked at Gutman. Gutman smiled benignly at him and said, "Well, Wilmer, I'm sorry indeed to lose you, and I want you to know that I couldn't be any fonder of you if you were my own son. But, well, by gad, if you lose a son, it's possible to get another, and there's only one Maltese Falcon." Spade laughed. Cairo moved over and whispered in the boy's ear. The boy, keeping his cold hazel eyes on Gutman's face, sat down on the sofa again. The Levantine sat beside him. Gutman's laugh did not affect the benignity of his smile. He said to Spade, "When you're young, you simply don't understand things." Cairo had an arm around the boy's shoulders again and was whispering to him. Spade grinned at Gutman and addressed Bridget O'Shaughnessy. "I think it'd be swell if you'd see what you can find us to eat in the kitchen, with plenty of coffee. Will you? I don't like to leave my guests." "Surely," she said and started towards the door. Gutman stopped rocking. "Just a moment, my dear." He held up a thick hand. "Hadn't you better leave the envelope in here? You don't want to get grease spots on it." The girl's eyes questioned Spade. He said in an indifferent tone, "It's still his." She put her hand inside her coat, took out the envelope, and gave it to Spade. Spade tossed it into Gutman's lap, saying, "Sit on it if you're afraid of losing it." "You misunderstand me," Gutman replied suavely. "It's not that at all, but business should be transacted in a business-like manner." He opened the flap of the envelope, took out the $10,000 bills, counted them, and chuckled so that his belly bounced. "For instance, there are only 9 bills here now."
He spread them out on his fat knees and thighs.
There were 10 when I handed it to you, as you very well know.
His smile was broad and jovial and triumphant. Spade looked at Bridget O'Shaughnessy and asked,
Well?
She shook her head sidewise with emphasis. She did not say anything, though her lips moved slightly, as if she had tried to. Her face was frightened. Spade held his hand out to Gutman, and the fat man put the money into it. Spade counted the money, $9,000 bills, and returned it to Gutman. Then Spade stood up, and his face was dull and placid. He picked up the 3 pistols on the table. He spoke in a matter-of-fact voice.
I want to know about this.
He nodded at the girl, but without looking at her.
Are going in the bathroom. The door will be open, and I'll be facing it. Unless you want a 3-story drop, there's no way out of here except past the bathroom door. Don't try to make it.
Really, sir? Gutman protested. It's not necessary, and certainly not very courteous of you to threaten us in this manner. You must know that we've not the least desire to leave.
I'll know a lot when I'm through.
Spade was patient but resolute.
This trick upsets things. I've got to find the answer. Won't take long.
He touched the girl's elbow.
Come on.
In the bathroom, Bridget O'Shaughnessy found words. She put her hands up flat on Spade's chest and her face up close to his and whispered, I did not take that bill, Sam.
I don't think you did,
he said.
But I've got to know. Take your clothes off.
You won't take my word for it?
No. Take your clothes off.
I won't.
All right. We'll go back to the other room and I'll have them take it off. And I'll have them taken off.
She stepped back with a hand to her mouth. Her eyes were round and horrified. You would? She asked through her fingers.
I will, he said. I've got to know what happened to that bill, and I'm not going to be held up by anybody's maidenly modesty.
Oh, it isn't that. She came close to him and put her hands on his chest again. I'm not ashamed to be naked before you, but can't you see? Not like this. Can't you see that if you make me, you'll be killing something? He did not raise his voice.
I don't know anything about that. I've got to know what happened to the bill. Take them off.
She looked at his unblinking yellow-gray eyes, and her face became pink and then white again. She drew herself up tall and began to undress. He sat on the side of the bathtub watching her and the open door. No sound came from the living room. She removed her clothes swiftly without fumbling, letting them fall on the floor around her feet. When she was naked, she stepped back from her clothing and stood looking at him. In her mien was pride without defiance or embarrassment. He put his pistols on the toilet seat and, facing the door, went down on one knee in front of her garments. He picked up each piece and examined it with fingers as well as eyes. He did not find the $1,000 bill. When he had finished, he stood up holding her clothes out in his hands to her.
Thanks,
he said.
Now I know.
She took the clothing from him. She did not say anything. He picked up the pistols. He shut the bathroom door behind him and went into the living room. Gutman smiled amiably at him from the rocking chair.
Find it?
He asked. Cairo, sitting beside the boy on the sofa, looked at Spade with questioning, opaque eyes. The boy did not look up. He was leaning forward, head between hands, elbows on knees, staring at the floor between his feet. Spade told Gutman,
No, I didn't find it.
You palmed it. The fat man chuckled.
I palmed it?
Yes, Spade said, jingling the pistols in his hand.
Do you want to say so, or do you want to stand for a frisk?
Stand for...
You're going to admit it, Spade said, or I'm going to search you. There's no third way.
Gutman looked up Spade's hard face and laughed outright.
By gad, sir. I believe you would. I really do. You're a character, sir, if you don't mind my saying so. You palmed it,
Spade said.
Yes, sir. That I did.
The fat man took a crumpled bill from his vest pocket, smoothed it on a wide thigh, took the envelope holding the 9 bills from his coat pocket, and put the smoothed bill in with the others. I must have my little joke every now and then, and I was curious to know what you'd do in a situation of that sort. I must say that you passed the test with flying colors, sir. It never occurred to me that you'd hit on such a simple and direct way of getting to the truth. Spade sneered at him without bitterness. That's the kind of thing I expect from somebody the punk's age. Gutman chuckled. Bridget O'Shaughnessy, dressed again except for coat and hat, came out of the bathroom, took a step towards the living room, turned around, went to the kitchen, and turned on the light. Cairo edged closer to the boy on the sofa and began whispering in his ear again. The boy shrugged irritably. Spade, looking at the pistols in his hand and then at Gutman, went out into the passageway. To the closet there. He opened the door, put the pistols inside on the top of a trunk, shut the door, locked it, put the key in his trousers pocket, and went to the kitchen door. Bridget O'Shaughnessy was filling an aluminum percolator. Find everything? Spade asked. Yes, she replied in a cool voice, not raising her head. Then she set the percolator aside and came to the door. She blushed and her eyes were large and moist and chiding. You shouldn't have done that to me, Sam, she said softly. I had to find out, Angel. He bent down, kissed her mouth lightly, and returned to the living room. Gutman smiled at Spade and offered him the white envelope, saying, This will soon be yours. You might as well take it now. Spade did not take it. He sat in the armchair and said, There's plenty of time for that. We haven't done enough talking about the money end. I ought to have more than 10,000. Gutman said, $10,000 is a lot of money. Spade said, You're quoting me, but it's not all the money in the world. No, sir, it's not, I grant you that. But it's a lot of money to be picked up in as few days and as easily as you're getting it. You think it's so damned easy? Spade asked and shrugged. Well, maybe. But that's my business. It certainly is, the fat man agreed. He screwed up his eyes, moved his head to indicate the kitchen, and lowered his voice. Are you sharing with her? Spade said, That's my business too. It certainly is, the fat man agreed once more. But, he hesitated, I'd like to give you a word of advice. Go ahead. If you don't, I dare say you'll give her some money in any event, but if you don't give her as much as she thinks she ought to have, my word of advice is, be careful. Spade's eyes held a mocking light. He asked, Bad? Bad, the fat man replied. Spade grinned and began to roll a cigarette. Cairo, still muttering in the boy's ear, had put his arm around the boy's shoulders again. Suddenly the boy pushed his arm away and turned on the sofa to face the Levantine. The boy's face held disgust and anger. He made a fist of one small hand and struck Cairo's mouth with it. Cairo cried out as a woman might have cried and drew back to the very end of the sofa. He took a silk handkerchief from his pocket and put it to his mouth. It came away daubed with blood. He put it to his mouth once more and looked reproachfully at the boy. The boy snarled, Keep away from me! And put his face between his hands again. Cairo's handkerchief released the fragrance of Kuiper in the room. Cairo's cry had brought Bridget O'Shaughnessy to the door. Spade, grinning, jerked a thumb at the sofa and told her, The course of true love. How's the food coming along? It's coming, she said and went back to the kitchen. Spade lighted his cigarette and addressed Gutman. Let's talk about money. Willingly, sir, with all my heart, the fat man replied. But I might as well tell you frankly right now that 10,000 is every cent I can raise. Spade exhaled smoke. I ought to have 20. I wish you could. I'd give it to you gladly if I had it, but $10,000 is every cent I can manage, on my word of honor. Of course, sir, you understand that is simply the first payment. Later? Spade laughed. I know you'll give me millions later, he said, but let's stick to the first payment now. 15,000? Gutman smiled and frowned and shook his head. Mr. Spade, I've told you frankly and candidly and on my word of honor as a gentleman that $10,000 is all the money I've got, every penny, and all I can raise. But you didn't say positively. Gutman laughed and said, Positively.
Spade said gloomily, "That's not any too good, but if it's the best you can do, give it to me."
Gutman handed him the envelope. Spade counted the bills and was putting them in his pocket when Bridget O'Shaughnessy came in carrying a tray. The boy would not eat. Cairo took a cup of coffee. The girl, Gutman, and Spade ate the scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, and marmalade she had prepared, and drank 2 cups of coffee apiece. Then they settled down to wait the rest of the night through. Gutman smoked a cigar and read Celebrated Criminal Cases of America, now and then chuckling over or commenting on the parts of its contents that amused him. Cairo nursed his mouth and sulked on his end of the sofa. The boy sat with his head in his hands until a little after 4 o'clock. Then he lay down with his feet towards Cairo, turned his face to the window, and went to sleep. Bridget O'Shaughnessy in the armchair dozed, listened to the fat man's comments, and carried on wide-spaced desultory conversations with Spade. Spade rolled and smoked cigarettes and moved, without fidgeting or nervousness, around the room. He sat sometimes on an arm of the girl's chair, on the table corner, on the floor at her feet, on a straight-backed chair. He was wide awake, cheerful, and full of vigor. At 5:30, he went into the kitchen and made more coffee. Half an hour later, the boy stirred, awakened, and sat up yawning. Gutman looked at his watch and questioned Spade.
"Can you get it now? Give me another hour."
Gutman nodded and went back to his book. At 7 o'clock, Spade went to the telephone and called Effie Perrin's number.
"Hello, Mrs. Perrin. This is Mr. Spade. Will you let me talk to Effie, please?" "Yes, it is." "Thanks."
He whistled 2 lines of In Cuba softly.
"Hello, Angel. Sorry to get you up." "Yes, very. Here's the plot. In our Holland box at the post office, you'll find an envelope addressed in my scribble. There's a Pickwick Stage parcel room. Check in it for the bundle we got yesterday. Will you get the bundle and bring it to me? PDQ." "Yes, I'm home." "That's the girl. Hustle. Bye."
The street doorbell rang at 10 minutes of 8. Spade went to the telephone box and pressed the button that released the lock. Gutman put down his book and rose, smiling. "You don't mind if I go to the door with you?" he asked.
"Okay,"
Spade told him. Gutman followed him to the corridor door. Spade opened it. Presently, Effie Perrin, carrying the brown-wrapped parcel, came from the elevator. Her boyish face was gay and bright, and she came forward quickly, almost trotting. After one glance, she did not look at Gutman. She smiled at Spade and gave him the parcel. He took it, saying,
"Thanks a lot, lady. Sorry to spoil your day of rest, but this..."
"It's not the first one you've spoiled," she replied, laughing, and then, when it was apparent that he was not going to invite her in, asked, "Anything else?" He shook his head.
"No thanks."
She said, "Bye-bye," and went to the elevator. Spade shut the door and carried the parcel into the living room. Gutman's face was red and his cheeks quivered. Cairo and Bridget O'Shaughnessy came to the table as Spade put the parcel there. They were excited. The boy rose, pale and tense, but he remained by the sofa, staring under curling lashes at the others. Spade stepped back from the table, saying,
"There you are."
Gutman's fat fingers made short work of cord and paper and excelsior, and he held the black bird in his hands. "Ah," he said huskily. "Now, after 17 years." His eyes were moist. Cairo licked his red lips and worked his hands together. The girl's lower lip was between her teeth. She and Cairo, like Gutman and like Spade and the boy, were breathing heavily. The air in the room was chilly and stale and thick with tobacco smoke. Gutman set the bird down on the table again and fumbled at a pocket. "It's it," he said, "but we'll make sure." Sweat glistened on his round cheeks. His fingers twitched as he took out a gold pocket knife and opened it. Cairo and the girl stood close to him, one on either side. Spade stood back a little where he could watch the boy as well as the group at the table. Gutman turned the bird upside down and scraped an edge of its base with his knife. Black enamel came off in tiny curls, exposing blackened metal beneath. Gutman's knife blade bit into the metal, turning back a thin curved shaving. The inside of the shaving, and the narrow plane its removal had left, had the soft gray sheen of lead. Gutman's breath hissed between his teeth. His face became turgid with hot blood. He twisted the bird around and hacked at its head. There, too, the edge of the knife bared lead. He let knife and bird bang down on the table when he wheeled to confront Spade. "It's a fake!" he said hoarsely. Spade's face had become somber. His nod was slow, but there was no slowness in his hands going out to catch Bridget O'Shaughnessy's wrist. He pulled her to him and grasped her chin with his other hand, raising her face roughly.
"All right," he growled into her face. "You've had your little joke. Now tell us about it."
She cried, "No, Sam, no! That's the one I got from Kemidov, I swear!" Joe Cairo thrust himself between Spade and Gutman and began to emit words in a shrill, spluttering stream. "That's it! That's it! It was the Russian! I should have known! What a fool we thought him, and what fools he made of us!" Tears ran down the Levantines' cheeks and he danced up and down. "You bungled it!" he screamed at Gutman. "You and your stupid attempt to buy it from him, you fat fool! You let him know it was valuable, and he found out how valuable, and made a duplicate for us. No wonder we had so little trouble stealing it. No wonder he was so willing to send me off around the world looking for it. You imbecile! You bloated idiot!" He put his hands to his face and blubbered. Gutman's jaw sagged. He blinked vacant eyes, then he shook himself, and was, by the time his bulbs had stopped jouncing, again a jovial fat man.
"Come, sir," he said good-naturedly. "There's no need of going on like that. Everyone errs at times, and you may be sure this is every bit as severe a blow to me as to anyone else. Yes, that is the Russian's hand, there's no doubt of it. Well, sir, what do you suggest? Shall we stand here and shed tears and call each other names, or shall we—" He paused, and his smile was as a cherub's. "Go to Constantinople." Cairo took his hands from his face, and his eyes bulged. He stammered, "You were—" Amazement coming with full comprehension made him speechless. Gutman patted his fat hands together. His eyes twinkled. His voice was a complacent, throaty purring. "For 17 years I have wanted that little item and have been trying to get it. If I must spend another year on the quest, well, sir, that will be additional expenditure in time of only—" His lips moved silently as he calculated. 5 15/17%. The Levantine giggled and cried, "I go with you!" Spade suddenly released the girl's wrist and looked around the room. The boy was not there. Spade went into the passageway. The corridor door stood open. Spade made a dissatisfied mouth, shut the door, and returned to the living room. He leaned against the door frame and looked at Gutman and Cairo. He looked at Gutman for a long time, scurrily. Then he spoke, mimicking the fat man's throaty purr.
"Well, sir, I must say you've a swell lot of thieves."
Gutman chuckled. "We've little enough to boast about, and that's a fact, sir," he said. "But, well, we're none of us yet dead. And there's not a bit of use thinking the world's come to an end just because we've run into a little setback." He brought his left hand from behind him and held it out towards Spade, pink, smooth, hilly palm up. "I'll have to ask you for that envelope, sir." Spade did not move. His face was wooden. He said,
"I held up my end. You got your dingus. It's your hard luck, not mine, that it wasn't what you wanted."
"Now come, sir," Gutman said persuasively. "We've all failed, and there's no reason for expecting any one of us to bear the brunt of it, and—" He brought his right hand from behind him. In the hand was a small pistol, an ornately engraved and inlaid affair of silver and gold and mother of pearl. "In short, sir, I must ask you to return my $10,000. Spade's face did not change.
He shrugged and took the envelope from his pocket. He started to hold it out to Gutman, hesitated, opened the envelope, and took out $1,000 bill. He put that bill into his trousers pocket. He tucked the envelope's flap in over the other bills and held them out to Gutman.
"That'll take care of my time and expenses,"
he said. Gutman, after a little pause, imitated Spade's shrug and accepted the envelope. He said,
"Now, sir, we will say goodbye to you, unless—"
The fat puffs around his eyes crinkled.
"You care to undertake the Constantinople expedition with us." "You don't?" "Well, sir, frankly, I'd like to have you along. You're a man to my liking, a man of many resources and nice judgment. Because we know you're a man of nice judgment, we know we can say goodbye with every assurance that you'll hold the details of our little enterprise in confidence. We know we can count on you to appreciate the fact that, as the situation now stands, any legal difficulties that come to us in connection with these last few days would likewise and equally come to you and the charming Miss O'Shaughnessy. You're too shrewd not to recognize that, sure. And, sir, I'm sure."
"I understand that,"
Spade replied. "I was sure you would. I'm also sure that, now there's no alternative, you'll somehow manage the police without a fall guy."
"I'll make it out all right,"
Spade replied. "I was sure you would. Well, sir, the shortest farewells are the best. Adieu." He made a portly bow. "And to you, Miss O'Shaughnessy, adieu. I leave you the rara avis on the table as a little memento."
End of chapter 19. I'm going to get some water and I will be right back to finish off the story. Okay, I'm back, and we have just one final chapter before the story is over. Chapter 20. If They Hang You. For all of 5 minutes after the outer door had closed behind Casper Gutman and Joe Cairo, Spade, motionless, stood staring at the knob of the open living room door. His eyes were gloomy under a forehead drawn down. The clefts at the root of his nose were deep and red. His lips protruded loosely, pouting. He drew them in to make a hard V and went to the telephone. He had not looked at Bridget O'Shaughnessy, who stood by the table, looking with uneasy eyes at him. He picked up the telephone, set it on its shelf again, and bent to look into the telephone directory hanging from a corner of the shelf. He turned the pages rapidly until he found the one he wanted, ran his fingers down a column, straightened up, and lifted the telephone from the shelf again. He called a number and said,
"Hello? Is Sergeant Polehouse there?" "Will you call him, please?" "This is Samuel Spade."
He stared into space, waiting.
"Hello, Tom."
I've got something for you. Yes, plenty. Here it is. Thursby and Jacoby were shot by a kid named Wilmer Cook. He described the boy minutely. He's working for a man named Casper Gutman. He described Gutman. That fellow Cairo you met here is in with them too. Yes, that's it. Gutman's staying at the Alexandria. Suite 12C, or was. They've just left here and they're blowing town, so you'll have to move fast, but I don't think they're expecting a pinch. There's a girl in it too. Gutman's daughter. He described Rhea Gutman. Watch yourself when you go up against the kid. He's supposed to be pretty good with a gun. That's right, Tom, and I've got some stuff here for you. I think I've got the guns he used. That's right. Step on it, and luck to you.
Spade slowly replaced receiver on prong, telephone on shelf. He wet his lips and looked down at his hands. Their palms were wet. He filled his deep chest with air. His eyes were glittering between straightened lids. He turned and took 3 long, swift steps into the living room. Bridget O'Shaughnessy, startled by the suddenness of his approach, let her breath out in a little laughing gasp. Spade, face to face with her, very close to her, tall, big-boned, and thick-muscled, coldly smiling, hard of jaw and eye, said,
They'll talk when they're nailed. About us. We're sitting on dynamite, and we've only got minutes to get set for the police. Give me all of it. Fast. Gutman sent you and Cairo to Constantinople?
She started to speak, hesitated, and bit her lip. He put a hand on her shoulder.
God damn you, talk, he said. I'm in this with you, and you're not gonna gum it. Talk. He sent you to Constantinople.
Yes, he sent me. I met Joe there and asked him to help me. Then we...
Wait. You asked Cairo to help you get it from Kemedov?
Yes.
For Gutman.
She hesitated again, squirmed under the hard, angry glare of his eyes, swallowed, and said,
No, not them. We thought we would get it for ourselves.
All right. Then?
Oh, then I began to be afraid that Joe wouldn't play fair with me, so I asked Floyd Thursby to help me.
And he did. Well?
Well, we got it and went to Hong Kong.
With Cairo, or had you ditched him before that?
Yes, we left him in Constantinople, in jail. Something about a check.
Something you fixed up to hold him there.
She looked shamefacedly at Spade and whispered,
Yes.
Right. Now you and Thursby are in Hong Kong with the bird.
Yes, and then I didn't know him very well. I didn't know whether I could trust him. I thought I would be safer. Anyway, I met Captain Jacoby and I knew his boat was coming here. So I asked him to bring a package for me. And that was the bird. I wasn't sure I could trust Thursby. Or that Joe. Or somebody working for Gutman might not be on the boat when we came on, and that seemed the safest plan.
All right. Then you and Thursby caught one of the fast boats over. Then what?
Then I was afraid of Gutman. I knew he had people, connections everywhere, and he'd soon know what we had done. And I was afraid he'd have learned that we had left Hong Kong for San Francisco. He was in New York, and I knew if he had heard that by cable, he would have plenty of time to get here by the time we did, or before. He did. I didn't know that then, but I was afraid of it, and I had to wait here until Captain Jacoby's boat arrived, and I was afraid Gutman would find me, or find Floyd and buy him over. That's why I came to you and asked you to watch him for...
That's a lie.
Spade said.
You had Thursby hooked and you knew it. He was a sucker for women. His record shows that. The only falls he took were over women, and once a chump, always a chump. Maybe you didn't know his record, but you'd know you'd had him safe.
She blushed and looked timidly at him. He said,
You wanted to get him out of the way before Jacoby came with the loot. What was your scheme?
I knew he'd left the States with a gambler after some trouble. I didn't know what it was, but I thought if it was anything serious and he saw a detective watching him, he'd think it was an account of the old trouble and would be frightened into going away. I didn't think...
You told him he was being shadowed.
Spade said confidently.
Miles hadn't many brains, but he wasn't clumsy enough to be spotted the first night.
I told him, yes. When we went out for a walk that night, I pretended to discover Mr. Archer following us and pointed him out to Floyd.
She sobbed.
But please believe me, Sam, that I wouldn't have done it if I thought Floyd would kill him. I thought he'd be frightened into leaving the city. I didn't for a minute think he'd shoot him like that.
Spade smiled wolfishly with his lips, but not at all with his eyes. He said,
If you thought he wouldn't, you were right, Angel.
The girl's upraised face held utter astonishment. Spade said,
Thursby didn't shoot him.
Incredulity joined astonishment in the girl's face. Spade said,
Miles hadn't many brains, but Christ, he had too many years' experience as a detective to be caught like that by the man he was shadowing. Up a blind alley with his gun tucked away on his hip and his overcoat buttoned? Not a chance. He was as dumb as any man ought to be, but he wasn't quite that dumb. The only two ways out of the alley could be watched from the edge of Bush Street over the tunnel. You told us Thursby was a bad actor. He couldn't have tricked Miles into the alley like that, and he couldn't have driven him in. He was dumb, but not dumb enough for that.
He ran his tongue over the inside of his lips and smiled affectionately at the girl. He said,
But he'd have gone up there with you, Angel, if he was sure nobody else was up there. You were his client, so he would have no reason for not dropping the shadow on your say-so. And if you caught up with him and asked him to go up there, he'd have gone. He was just dumb enough for that. He'd have looked you up and down and licked his lips and gone grinning from ear to ear, and then you could have stood as close to him as you like in the dark and put a hole through him with the gun you had got from Thursby that evening.
Bridget O'Shaughnessy shrank back from him until the edge of the table stopped her. She looked at him with terrified eyes and cried, Don't talk to me like that, Sam. You know I didn't, you know.
Stop it.
He looked at the watch on his wrist.
The police will be blowing in any minute now, and we're sitting on dynamite. Talk.
She put the back of a hand on her forehead.
Oh, why do you accuse me of such a terrible...
Will you stop it? He demanded in a low, impatient voice. This isn't the spot for the schoolgirl act. Listen to me. The pair of us are sitting under the gallows.
He took hold of her wrists and made her stand up straight in front of him.
Talk.
How did you know he licked his lips and looked...
Spade laughed harshly.
I knew, Miles. But never mind that. Why did you shoot him?
She twisted her wrists out of Spade's fingers and put her hands up around the back of his neck, pulling his head down until his mouth all but touched hers. Her body was flat against his, from knees to chest. He put his arms around her, holding her tight to him. Her dark-lashed lids were half down over velvet eyes. Her voice was hushed, throbbing.
I didn't mean to, at first. I didn't, really. I meant what I told you. But when I saw Floyd couldn't be frightened,
Spade slapped her shoulder.
He said, That's a lie. You asked me, Miles, and me to handle it ourselves. You wanted to be sure the shadower was somebody you knew and who knew you, so they'd go with you. You got the gun from Thursby that day, that night. You had already rented the apartment at the Coronet. You had trunks there and none at the hotel, and when I looked at the apartment over, I found a rent receipt dated 5 or 6 days before the time you told me you rented it.
She swallowed with difficulty, and her voice was humble.
Yes, That's a lie, Sam. I did intend to if Floyd... I can't look at you and tell you this, Sam.
She pulled his head farther down until her cheek was against his cheek, her mouth by his ear, and whispered,
I knew Floyd wouldn't be easily frightened, but I thought that if he knew somebody was shadowing him, he'd... Oh, I can't say it, Sam.
She clung to him, sobbing.
Spade said, you thought Floyd would tackle him and one or the other of them would go down. If Thursby was the one, you were rid of him. If Miles was, then you see that Floyd was caught and you'd be rid of him. That it?
Something like that.
And when you found that Thursby didn't mean to tackle him, you borrowed the gun and did it yourself, right?
Yes, though not exactly.
But exact enough. And you had that plan up your sleeve from the first. You thought Floyd would be nailed for the killing.
I thought they'd hold him at least until after Captain Jacoby had arrived with the Falcon
And you didn't know then that Gutman was here hunting for you. You didn't suspect that or you wouldn't have shaken your gunman. You knew Gutman was here as soon as you heard Thursby had been shot. Then you knew you needed another protector. So you came back to me, right?
Yes, but... Oh, sweetheart, it wasn't only that. I would have come back to you sooner or later. From the first instant I saw you, I knew...
Spade said tenderly,
You angel. Well, if you get a good break, you'll be out of San Quentin in 20 years and you can come back to me then.
She took her cheek away from his, drawing her head far back to stare without comprehension at him. He was pale. He said tenderly,
I hope to Christ they don't hang you, precious, by that sweet neck.
He slid his hands up to caress her throat. In an instant, she was out of his arms, back against the table, crouching, both hands spread over her throat. Her face was wild-eyed, haggard, her dry mouth opened and closed. She said in a small, parched voice,
You're not...
She could get no other words out. Spade's face was yellow-white now. His mouth smiled, and there were smile wrinkles around his glittering eyes. His voice was soft, gentle. He said,
I'm gonna send you over. The chances are you'll get off with life. That means you'll be out again in 20 years. You're an angel. I'll wait for you.
He cleared his throat.
If they hang you, I'll always remember you.
She dropped her hands and stood erect. Her face became smooth and untroubled except for the faintest of dubious glints in her eyes. She smiled back at him gently.
Don't, Sam. Don't say that even in fun. Oh, you frightened me for a moment. I really thought you... You know, you do such wild and unpredictable things that...
She broke off. She thrust her face forward and stared deep into his eyes. Her cheeks and the flesh around her mouth shivered and fear came back into her eyes.
What? Sam!
She put her hands to her throat again and lost her erectness. Spade laughed. His yellow-white face was damp with sweat, and though he held his smile, he could not hold softness in his voice. He croaked.
Don't be silly. You're taking the fall. One of us has got to take it. After the talking those birds will do. They'd hang me, sure. You're likely to get a better break. Well?
But, Sam, you can't. Not after what we've been to each other. You can't.
Like hell I can't.
She took a long, trembling breath.
You've been playing with me? Only pretending you cared to trap me like this. You didn't care at all? You don't love me?
I think I do.
Spade said.
What of it?
The muscles holding his smile in place stood out like whales.
I'm not Thursby. I'm not Jacoby. I won't play the sap for you.
This is not just,
she cried.
Tears came to her eyes. "It's unfair! It's contemptible of you! You know it was not that! You can't say that!"
Like hell I can't.
Spade said.
You came into my bed to stop me asking questions. You led me out yesterday for Gutman with that phony call for help. Last night, you came here with them and waited outside for me and came in with me. You were in my arms when the trap was sprung. I couldn't have gone for a gun if I'd had one on me, and couldn't have made a fight of it if I wanted to. And if they didn't take you away with them, it was only because Gutman's got too much sense to trust you except for short stretches when he has to, and because he thought I'd play the sap for you, and, not wanting to hurt you, wouldn't be able to hurt him.
Bridget O'Shaughnessy blinked her tears away. She took a step towards him and stood looking him in the eyes, straight and proud.
"You called me a liar,"
she said.
"Now you're lying. You're lying if you say you don't know down in your heart that in spite of anything I've done, I love you."
Spade made a short, abrupt bow. His eyes were becoming bloodshot, but there was no other change in his damp and yellowish, fixedly smiling face.
Maybe I do,
he said.
What of it? I should trust you? You who arranged that nice little trick for my predecessor, Thursby? You who knocked off Miles, a man you had nothing against, in cold blood, just like swatting a fly, for the sake of double-crossing Thursby? You who double-crossed Gutman, Cairo, Thursby, 1, 2, 3? You who've never played square with me for half an hour at a stretch since I've known you. I should trust you? No, darling. I wouldn't do it even if I could. Why should I?
Her eyes were steady under his, and her hushed voice was steady when she replied,
"Why should you? If you've been playing with me, if you do not love me, there is no answer to that. If you did, no answer would be needed."
Blood streaked Spade's eyeballs now, and his long-held smile had become a frightful grimace. He cleared his throat huskily and said,
Making speeches is no damn good now.
He put a hand on her shoulder. The hand shook and jerked.
I don't care who loves who. I'm not gonna play the sap for you. I won't walk in Thursby's, and Christ who knows who else's footsteps. You killed Miles, and you're going over for it. I could have helped you by letting the others go, and standing off the police the best way I could. It's too late for that now. I can't help you now, and I wouldn't if I could.
She put a hand on his hand on her shoulder.
"Don't help me then," she whispered, "but don't hurt me. Let me go away now."
No,
he said.
I'm sunk if I haven't got you to hand over to the police when they come. That's the only thing that can keep me from going down with the others.
"You won't do that for me?"
I won't play the sap for you.
"Don't say that, please."
She took his hand from her shoulder and held it to her face.
"Why must you do this to me, Sam? Surely Mr. Archer wasn't as much to you as—"
Miles, Spade said hoarsely, was a son of a bitch. I found that out the first week we were in business together, and I meant to kick him out as soon as the year was up. You didn't do me a damn bit of harm by killing him.
"Then what?"
Spade pulled his hand out of hers. He no longer either smiled or grimaced. His wet yellow face was set hard and deeply lined. His eyes burned madly. He said,
Listen, this isn't a damn bit of good. You'll never understand me, but I'll try once more and then we'll give it up. Listen. When a man's partner is killed, he's supposed to do something about it. It doesn't make any difference what you thought of him. He was your partner, and you're supposed to do something about it. Then it happens. We were in the detective business. Well, when one of your organization gets killed, it's bad business to let the killer get away with it. It's bad all around. Bad for that one organization. Bad for every detective everywhere. Third, I'm a detective, And expecting me to run criminals down and then let them go free is like asking a dog to catch a rabbit and let it go. It can be done alright, and sometimes it is done. But it's not the natural thing. The only way I could have let you go was by letting Gutman and Cairo and the kid go. That's...
You're not serious, she said. You don't expect me to think that these things you're saying are sufficient reason for sending me to the...
Wait till I'm through and then you can talk. Fourth, no matter what I wanted to do now, it would be absolutely impossible for me to let you go without having myself dragged to the gallows with the others. Next, I've no reason in God's world to think I can trust you, and if I did this and got away with it, you'd have something on me that you can use whenever you happen to want to. That's 5 of them. The 6th would be that, since I've also got something on you, I couldn't be sure you wouldn't decide to shoot a hole in me someday. 7th, I don't even like the idea of thinking there might be 1 chance in 100 that you've played me for a sucker. And 8th, but that's enough. All those on one side. Maybe some of those are unimportant. I won't argue about that, but look at the number of them. Now on the other side, we've got what? All we've got is the fact that maybe you love me, and maybe I love you.
You know, she whispered, whether you do or not.
I don't. It's easy enough to be nuts about you.
He looked hungrily from her hair to her feet and up to her eyes again.
But I don't know what that amounts to. Does anybody ever? But suppose I do. What of it? Maybe next month I won't. I've been through it before, when it lasted that long. Then what? Then I'll think I played the sap. And if I did it, and got sent over, then I'd be sure I was the sap. Well, if I send you over, I'll be sorry as hell. I'll have some rotten nights. But that'll pass. Listen.
He took her by the shoulders and bent her back, leaning over her.
If that doesn't mean anything to you, forget it, and we'll make it this. I won't, because all of me wants to. Wants to say hell with the consequences and do it, and because goddamn you, you've counted on that with me the same as you counted on that with the others.
He took his hands from her shoulders and let them fall to his sides. She put her hands up to his cheeks and drew his face down again.
Look at me, she said, and tell me the truth. Would you have done this to me if the Falcon had been real and you had been paid your money?
What difference does that make now? Don't be too sure I'm as crooked as I'm supposed to be. That kind of reputation might be good business, bringing in high-priced jobs and making it easier to deal with the enemy.
She looked at him, saying nothing. He moved his shoulders a little and said,
Well, a lot of money would have been at least one more item on the other side of the scales.
She put her face up to his face. Her mouth was slightly open, with lips a little thrust out. She whispered,
If you loved me, you'd need nothing more on that side.
Spade set the edges of his teeth together and said through them,
I won't play the sap for you.
She put her mouth to his, slowly, her arms around him, and came into his arms. She was in his arms when the doorbell rang. Spade, left arm around Bridget O'Shaughnessy, opened the corridor door. Lieutenant Dundee, Detective Sergeant Tom Polhouse, and 2 other detectives were there. Spade said,
Hello, Tom. Get them?
Polhouse said,
Got them. Swell. Come in. Here's another one for you.
Spade pressed the girl forward.
She killed Miles. And I've got some exhibits. The boy's guns, one of Cairo's, a black statuette that all the hell was about, and a $1,000 bill that I was supposed to be bribed with.
He looked at Dundee, drew his brows together, leaned forward to peer into the lieutenant's face and burst out laughing.
What in hell's the matter with your little playmate, Tom? He looks heartbroken.
He laughed again.
I bet by God, when he heard Gutman's story, he thought he had me at last.
Cut it out, Sam,
Tom grumbled.
We didn't think.
Like hell he didn't, Spade said merrily. He came up here with his mouth watering, though you'd have sense enough to know I'd been stringing Gutman.
Cut it out, Tom grumbled again, looking uneasily sidewise at his superior. Anyways, we got it from Cairo. Gutman's dead. The kid had just finished shooting him up when we got there.
Spade nodded. He ought to have expected that, he said.
Effie Perrin put down her newspaper and jumped out of Spade's chair when he came into the office at a little after 9 o'clock Monday morning. He said,
Morning, Angel.
Is that what the papers have, right?
She asked.
Yes, ma'am.
He dropped his hat on the desk and sat down. His face was pasty in color, but its lines were strong and cheerful, and his eyes, though still somewhat red-veined, were clear. The girl's brown eyes were peculiarly enlarged, and there was a queer twist to her mouth. She stood beside him, staring down at him. He raised his head, grinned, and said, mockingly, So much for your woman's intuition. Her voice was queer as the expression on her face.
You did that, Sam? To her?
He nodded.
Your Sam's a detective.
He looked sharply at her. He put his arm around her waist, his hand on her hip.
She did kill Miles, Angel, he said gently. Offhand, like that.
He snapped the fingers of his other hand. She escaped from his arm as if it had hurt her.
Don't, please. Don't touch me,
she said brokenly.
I know you're right. You're right. But don't touch me now. Not now.
Spade's face became pale as his collar. The corridor door's knob rattled. Effie Perrin turned quickly and went into the outer office, shutting the door behind her. When she came in again, she shut it behind her. She said in a small, flat voice,
Iva's here.
Spade, looking down at his desk, nodded almost imperceptibly.
Yes,
he said, and shivered.
Well, send her in.
The end. And that was the Maltese Falcon. Didn't expect that kind of ending. In all honesty, the Fallout place was better. So, what did you guys think of the story? And, more importantly, did you enjoy my performance of it? It was very fun. Toss his rose bouquet. Aw, thank you, thank you. Well, at least I get to say I finally got to read this story, got to experience it, and probably got to be the first person to read it on stream. So, that's nice. And if not, well, I'm definitely the first person to read it on stream after it reached the public domain, probably. Well, that concludes our story for this round. Next week's schedule will be coming out within the next couple of days, and
I will be streaming on Monday and Tuesday this week, and possibly a third day as well. So I'm still working out my timetable, but I do know that Monday and Tuesday are my definite days this week, this coming week. So we'll figure out the rest. There's gonna be more Ace Attorney, and I will probably take a little bit of a break from reading novels for a second, and then I'll get back to that fairly soon. Mostly just going to be spending time figuring out and finding more stories that I want to read. So, just be on the lookout as always, and I will do my best to update you guys as soon as I have another story in mind. But thank you all so much for being here and for listening. It was a lot of fun, and I'm very glad I got to read this story with you. So, yeah. So, 50 Shades next. You're silly. But it's that time, my wonderful Rainiacs and Langsters. Thank you all so much for being here. Make sure to eat well, stay hydrated, and get lots of good rest. Be kind to yourselves and be excellent to each other, and have a radiant rest of your day. And of course, as always, remember to unshrimp yourselves. Take care, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.